Chapter 710. As if they had been granted amnesty, the two models ran back in a panic. Poplar Fruit stood quietly on the runway, looking at their backs and sighing slightly. He had been the bad guy for once, and he didn't like the bad guy who used his power to bully others. They were too stupid to be fooled by him, but he believed that they would slowly understand after going back. In that case, his reputation among these models would probably be even worse. However, if Poplar Fruit were to choose again, Poplar Fruit would still stand up and criticize them. There was no other reason. A good teacher like Babla was worth it. Poplar Fruit turned around and saw Babla's grateful expression. He smiled and said, "Babla, let's continue." Babla laughed involuntarily. She waved her hand and said, "Leon, look at what time it is. Take a break and continue in the afternoon." The working attitude of French people was not like other countries. They paid attention to relaxation and moderation. Sometimes, it was even possible for them to take a vacation abroad for the whole month. Poplar Fruit looked at the clock hanging on the side. It was already 12:30. He smiled and said, "Babla, I'm sorry, I didn't notice. I'll treat you to lunch at the Western restaurant downstairs." "No need to treat, let's go Dutch." Babla laughed. It was not popular to treat people to lunch overseas. However, Poplar Fruit still insisted, "Babla, I'll treat you. According to Chinese customs, we treat our teachers to lunch to express our gratitude and gratitude." Babla did not insist. Poplar Fruit went back to the back of the runway to change clothes. When he came out, he was very plain again. "Leon, you should buy some good clothes." Babla used a more euphemistic word. "It will be easier for you to integrate into the upper class." Poplar Fruit understood these principles, but he did not have any expectations for the so-called upper class. It was fine as long as he wore clothes that were comfortable. There was no need to dress like the models opposite him, which was very strange. Coming to Kiki's side, Poplar Fruit saw that the little girl was holding a bottle of milk and drinking it comfortably. Poplar Fruit forgot about the time, but Fong Min, as an assistant, did not. She had already made milk for Kiki. Of course, they were all brought by Poplar Fruit. "Papa, Papa." Kiki can say just sweet Chi-Chi. Seeing her father come over, Kiki moved the milk bottle away and happily showed off to her father. "Bravo." Poplar Fruit laughed and gave Kiki a thumbs up. Kiki happily followed suit. "Kiki, your English name. Well, your French name is not Chi-Chi. That doesn't sound good." Poplar Fruit corrected her. "Dad named you Logiel. Or, you could come up with one yourself." Kiki scratched her head and said, "I like Papa's name." The little girl did not know how to give herself a name. Poplar Fruit smiled proudly. "Great." Fong Min gave Poplar Fruit a thumbs up and smiled. "Kiki inherited your language talent." Although it was a compliment, Fong Min was really envious. Watching cartoons with Kiki, she was still stupidly looking at the subtitles, while Kiki could already imitate and speak French. Poplar Fruit smiled and modestly said to her, he was very proud of Kiki. His daughter would definitely be better than him in the future. The third floor was a luxurious Western restaurant, and the price was naturally not cheap. Including the tip, Poplar Fruit had to pay a bill of nearly 4,000 yuan. Poplar Fruit did not feel the pinch. However, Artel had already arranged for it. He gave Fongmin a credit card and covered all of Poplar Fruit's expenses in France. So, Poplar Fruit's treat later became a gift to Buddha with borrowed flowers. The food was very good. The taste of French food was not bad. As Fong Min said, there were steak sirloin, baked snails, pan-fried foie gras, and so on. However, these were not to Kiki's liking. Poplar Fruit ordered a small dessert for Kiki to try. After a while, the little girl yawned and took a nap in her father's arms. Barbara looked at Kiki. Her eyes were gentle for a while and complicated for a while. As a woman, when she saw such a well-behaved girl, Barbara would also show her maternal instinct. This was something that transcended skin color and nationality. However, Barbara was very responsible for her work. Her professionalism made her feel that it was wrong for Poplar Fruit to bring his child to work. However, it seemed that she could not blame Poplar Fruit. Poplar Fruit was arranged by Artel, and Kiki was not very noisy and did not disturb everyone. Barbara really could not bear to drive Kiki away. It was really contradictory. Fong Min was very attentive. She had trained a pair of eyes in Beijing that knew how to observe people's expressions. She discovered Barbara's inner thoughts. Fong Min glanced at Poplar Fruit, who was holding Kiki and happily eating the delicious food on the table. She laughed in her heart. You still need me, your assistant, to put out the fire for you. Fong Min turned her head and whispered to Babla, Babla, you know that I was sent by Mr. Ardle, right? Of course. She was speaking in English. Babla's English was not bad, so she could understand. Barbara nodded in confusion and looked at Fong Min. She did not understand what she was going to say. Fong Min smiled and said, I think you must think that I'm here to serve Leon. Actually, I'm not. You're not? Barbara asked in surprise. Is she here to spy on a staff? She was a little surprised and doubtful. Haha, my task is actually to take care of Leon's child. Fong Min smiled brightly and said, Mr. Ardle likes this child very much. She's also a good friend of Princess Luo Danny. Barbara was completely shocked. She guessed in her heart, this child's status is higher than Leon's? Or is it because of this child that Leon was able to enter Givenchy's modeling team? Poplar Fruit also heard their conversation. From his point of view, Fong Min was right. She was indeed here to take care of Kiki. Moreover, Kiki was indeed a good friend of Luo Danny. Although they had only known each other for a day, Kiki's friendliness could not be underestimated. What Poplar Fruit did not know was that Fong Min's words were 50% exaggerated. Her main duty was to serve Poplar Fruit well. She also did not know that Kiki had really become good friends with Luo Danny. However, the effect was achieved. After hearing Fong Min's words, Barbara still hadn't considered that Fong Min would lie to her to this extent. In her mind, she thought, why is this adorable little girl also such a character that shouldn't be trifled with? Forget it. I'd better not make things difficult for her. My daughter is very well behaved. I don't want to be the bad guy. Besides, with her cheering Leon on from his side, who knows, Leon might even improve a little faster. Chapter 711. In the afternoon, they went back to the 7th floor to continue practicing. Suddenly, there was a commotion in the crowd as greetings filled the air. Even Poplar Fruit and the others couldn't help looking over at this commotion. What kind of big shot had arrived? Poplar Fruit and Barbara also looked over. The sound was getting closer and closer. The crowd in front of the T-stage parted, and 2 men in red flowery clothes walked out with their heads held high. Pooh! Poplar Fruit couldn't help laughing. Leon, you know Mr. Matisse and Mr. Victor? Barbara asked in a curious voice. I met them yesterday. They are Mr. Ardle's makeup artist and hairstylist. Poplar Fruit said with a smile. How do you know them? Are they very famous? Of course. The famous Matisse and Victor of the fashion world. They were the darlings of the fashion world who worked for Mr. Sarkozy before. Barbara said in a worshipful voice, look at the makeup artists and hairstylists here, including the models who brought them here. They all have to respectfully call them Mr. when they see them. No wonder the 2 of them were dressed like proud little roosters. Matisse and Victor seemed to be looking for Poplar Fruit. Under the guidance of someone, the 2 of them looked at Poplar Fruit before walking over. Poplar Fruit saw this, and his head swelled up as he thought, it can't be, right? They're serious? Matisse, Victor. Poplar Fruit came forward and scratched his head as he said, why are you free today? Before he could finish, Victor jumped and shouted, Leon, damn it, put down your hand. I did your hairstyle for you yesterday. Damn, it's a chicken coop now. Poplar Fruit awkwardly raised his hand. He had been paying attention the entire time, but now that he was thinking about something else, he unconsciously scratched it. It's a good thing I washed off his makeup. Seeing his bare face, I don't need to worry about him ruining my work. Matisse said with a smile of schadenfreude on the side. You're laughing at me? Look at how he went up without any makeup. With the lights shining on him. How ugly would he be? Even if you don't feel ashamed, I feel ashamed because my partner is his incompetent makeup artist. Victor said with regret as he shook his beard. My friends, stop arguing. Poplar Fruit said with a headache. I haven't asked, why are you here? Doesn't Mr. Ardle need you to put on makeup? Victor laughed. Leon, have you forgotten? Didn't we talk about it yesterday? We want to be your professional makeup artist and hairstylist. Artel agreed. Poplar Fruit asked, dumbfounded. Of course, we'll take care of you while you're in Bali. Victor smiled. We're going to turn you into the brightest star of Fashion Week. Matisse yelled enthusiastically. Oh my God! Poplar Fruit felt that the world was not normal. He even suspected that he was blessed by Lady Luck. Otherwise, why would he be able to stay in such a luxurious hotel in Bali, have such a good teacher to give him one-on-one guidance, and have two top makeup artists and hairstylists in the industry to serve him? Not only Poplar Fruit, but Barbara, who was listening to their conversation, also could not believe her ears. She looked at Poplar Fruit and muttered to herself, is he Mr. Artel's illegitimate son? Otherwise, why would he spare no effort to support him? Poplar Fruit did not know that Barbara was criticizing him in her mind. At this time, he was being held back by the two ladies. Leon, come down. I'm going to do your hair again. It's too ugly. Victor said in a picky tone. Let me put on makeup first. Can't you see that he doesn't have any foundation on his face? Matisse argued. Poplar Fruit stopped them and said, Matisse, can I not put on makeup first? I haven't learned how to walk on the runway yet. I'll rehearse with makeup after I learn it. Okay? You haven't learned how to walk on the runway yet? How is that possible? Matisse exclaimed in surprise. Yesterday, I saw that you were already a very good model. Look at your temperament and posture in the photo. I didn't lie to you. It's true. Poplar Fruit waved his hand and said helplessly, You thought so yesterday because I took a few photos under Mr. Artel's guidance in China last year. Without makeup, Matisse was a little hesitant. You can do it without makeup. Victor waved his hand and gave a majestic conclusion. While everyone was looking at him in confusion, Victor smiled and said, But I still need to fix my hair. It's embarrassing to walk on the runway with messy hair. Humph! Everyone rolled their eyes at him in disdain. After a while, the two sides compromised. Poplar Fruit could spare some time for Victor to fix his hair, just a little adjustment. Then they tolerated Poplar Fruit's temporary no-makeup state. At this time, Chi-Chi broke free from Fong Min's side and jogged over. She pulled on her father's trousers and looked at Victor and the others curiously, asking, Uncle, are you guys gay? Kiki spoke in English, but Poplar Fruit was instantly frozen. He was confused and quickly apologized to Victor. I'm sorry, Victor Matisse. My daughter is too rude. Kiki apologized to the two uncles. Poplar Fruit said in Chinese beside Kiki's ear. Matisse was thin and weak, but he was a very broad-minded person. He smiled and said in strangely pronounced English, Little angel, you're right. We are indeed a couple, but the word gay is impolite. We usually say homo. Kiki, c'est mille pardons, messieurs. Apologized to the uncles. Kiki turned her head and saw her father's determined eyes. Then she obediently said, according to her father's request. Alara. Matisse and Victor laughed and said, Little angel speaks French so well. Sir, my name is Logiel, not Little Angel, Kiki said seriously. Logiel? I don't think I've heard of such a name. Matisse thought that Kiki had mispronounced it. Poplar Fruit smiled and picked up Kiki. He smiled and said to Matisse, Logiel is the abbreviation of Los Angeles. When I gave her a Chinese name, I got the inspiration from the name of the city of Los Angeles. It's a very nice name, just like an angel. No wonder Mr. Artel keeps saying Little Angel. Matisse smiled and shook hands with Kiki. At first, Kiki thought that she was unhappy about the apology. But when Matisse teased her, Kiki's mood changed. She smiled and her eyes were curved. She was so cute. Chapter 712. After a brief interlude with Kiki, Poplar Fruit began to do his hair. Matisse. Poplar Fruit sat there and said to Matisse, Actually, you don't need to come here to accompany me during this period of time. I still have a lot of things to learn. I don't know when I'll be qualified to train with makeup. Matisse waved his hand with a smile and said, It doesn't matter. If you don't need makeup, we'll just sit here. It's no different from a vacation. Well, if you feel bored, then go down and take a walk, Poplar Fruit said with a shrug. Hey, Leon, don't move. Victor said angrily. It was not easy to do the hair. In fact, it was just spraying some hair, styling water, and scratching it. Victor looked at it and was satisfied. Poplar Fruit looked at it in the mirror and did not feel much change. Not bad, Barbara said with admiration. Leon, you are indeed a model material. It's a pity that you didn't learn earlier. Back on the runway, Barbara and Poplar Fruit began a long journey of teaching and learning. Below the stage, Matisse and Victor looked at each other. They had been watching for a while, and then they slowly felt that something was wrong. Dear, am I seeing things? Matisse murmured. Is Leon doing body training now? Yeah, I think so. Victor touched his beard, blinked, and said, something's not right. Why is he training his body? Isn't he going to practice runway walking? Although they were only makeup artists and hairstylists, Matisse and the others often went to those fashion shows, especially Matisse. He loved beauty so much that he would not miss the shows of not only clothes, but also perfumes and accessories. It was really because of their influence that Matisse and the others also had some common sense about these models. Even if they did not know how to walk, they had a higher ability to appreciate. Matisse frowned and said, could it be that Leon really doesn't know how to walk? From my professional point of view, Leon is like a newbie, and there are all kinds of uncoordinated movements. Yes, indeed. Victor didn't feel optimistic either. He looked at Kiki, who was not far away, and didn't say anything harsh. Let's wait and see. The most basic model training was very boring. For example, they had to swing their legs for a few minutes and shake their hips dozens of times. After watching for a while, Mattis and the others felt that their eyelids couldn't open. They were so bored that they wanted to sleep. Hee, Matisse, a friend, recommended me a funny video on YouTube. Do you want to watch it together? Victor took out his phone and patted Matisse's arm with a smile. Okay. Martis hugged his arm. The two of them sat together and watched the online video. The Wi-Fi in the hall was very fast, and there was no lag when watching videos. 1 hour, 2 hours. Fong Min even brought Kiki downstairs for a stroll. When they came back, Poplar Fruit and Barbara were still seriously practicing the most basic exercises. Don't let your feet off the ground. Lift your hips slightly, stand on your left heel, and point your toes on the ground. This will make your hips at an angle to the ground. Keep it for a while, and then change sides. Barbara talked a lot about the key points of hip pressing, hip balancing, waist balancing, and hip balancing. The hips had a very important impact on the model's catwalk. Not only the shape of the hips, but also the beauty of the person's bones when they moved. Therefore, Barbara paid attention to this aspect of teaching and emphasized that Poplar Fruit must master these movements. In fact, other instructors wouldn't be so meticulous because not everyone could remember all the details. Even if they had muscle memory, there might still be mistakes. Therefore, model training usually started from the basics and then gave guidance and fine-tuning when training on stage. Only an extraordinary genius like Yang Guo would be able to seriously memorize and imitate the entire set. Only someone as inflexible as Barbara would be able to provide such comprehensive and difficult guidance. Martis raised his head and moved his neck. Then he looked at Poplar Fruit's exercises. Suddenly, his head stopped moving. Victor was covering his mouth and laughing. He patted Martis and pointed at the phone screen. Dear, look at this guy. Martis didn't respond. Victor looked at him strangely, then looked at Poplar Fruit and said half-jokingly, Martis, are you crazy about our Leon? Then I'll be sad. Martis turned his head and looked at him. He put his arm around Victor's neck and kissed him heavily. Then he turned his head nonchalantly and pointed at Poplar Fruit. Look at him. Fong Min noticed the commotion on this side and saw the two kissing as if no one else was around. Her eyebrows twitched, and she quickly used her body to block Chi-Chi's line of sight. Oh, Annie Fong, don't block the light. Kiki pushed Fong Min unhappily. Victor was in a daze after being kissed by Matisse, and the expression on his furry, bearded face was very gentle. However, he looked at the runway and didn't understand Martis's focus. What's wrong? Martis said without turning his head. Don't you think Leon has improved? Really? Victor looked up in confusion. He looked carefully for a while. This. Victor was so surprised that he couldn't close his mouth. He was not as good as Martis in this respect, but he still saw the change in Poplar Fruit. Do you see it? Compared with Leon 2 hours ago, he has undergone a drastic change. Martis said in an admiring tone. If Poplar Fruit 2 hours ago looked like an ordinary person without any experience, then now Poplar Fruit looked like a model. He wasn't pretending just now, was he? Victor asked doubtfully. Martis looked at Victor unhappily and said, "How could it be? Is our friend such a person?" Victor also regretted his doubts. He shook his head and said, "Sorry, I was too excited and said something wrong. Leon looks like he's really talented." The two began to be serious. They put away their phones and watched Poplar Fruit's performance on the stage. After watching for a while, they made a new discovery. Victor looked at the blue eyes and said, "Isn't he afraid of being tired? How long has he been standing on tiptoe?" Geniuses are not terrible. What's terrible is that geniuses work hard, Martis said with emotion. It seemed that Poplar Fruit had been practicing for the whole afternoon without rest. Chapter 7:13. The boring training had become the most interesting pastime in the eyes of Matisse and Victor. Looking at Poplar Fruit on the stage, Matisse and Victor put away their mobile phones, as if they were watching a wonderful comedy. The learning of a genius was too pleasing to the eyes. Perhaps other models would feel frustrated, but Matisse and Victor were not in the same industry. Looking at Poplar Fruit's performance and the smooth progress, it was as if a master was playing the piano. The rhythm was bright and clear, and it could be seen with the naked eye. When they said goodbye to Poplar Fruit in the evening, their eyes were filled with faint expectations. They could not wait to see what would happen in 10 days with Poplar Fruit's speed of progress. Perhaps we will have the opportunity to witness a miracle, Matisse and Victor said. Victor nodded in agreement. Originally, Poplar Fruit wanted to invite Matisse and Victor to play together, but Matisse and Victor wanted to enjoy their time alone. Poplar Fruit could only regretfully say goodbye to them. "Fong Min, do you want to go to the Champs-Élysées with us? Buy something to bring back to China?" Poplar Fruit laughed. Fong Min laughed and said, "No need. You young people can go play. I will go back to the hotel to rest." Her hotel was far away. Of course, it could not be a luxurious hotel like Shangri-La. "I am still young." Poplar Fruit laughed. "Fong Min, you make yourself sound old." "Oh, Miss Zheng told me that you're not 25 years old this year." Fong Min winked at Poplar Fruit. "But your physical strength is really good. You have been standing for a whole day. Aren't you tired?" She felt tired as a babysitter. Poplar Fruit felt that the state of his muscles was good. There was no feeling of soreness. Perhaps it was because he was practicing while using his martial arts to relieve muscle fatigue. His current internal strength had been very slow after the cheek-condensing liquid stage, but the benefits were still very obvious. "You're still in contact with Yujia?" Poplar Fruit asked in surprise. "Hee. You don't have any objections, do you?" "Miss Zheng and I are actually very good friends," Fong Min said with a smile. Of course, this was a lie. Zheng Yujia was her big client, and Zheng Yujia only treated her as a good relationship. However, when she told Zheng Yujia that she was going abroad to be Poplar Fruit's assistant, Zheng Yujia immediately became familiar with her. "What's your opinion?" "Of course not." Poplar Fruit smiled. "Then I have to say it." Fong Min covered her mouth and laughed. "Our sister Zheng has a big problem with you." Poplar Fruit rubbed his nose and asked, "Really? What did I do wrong to make Yujia angry?" "First of all, you haven't posted on Weibo for many days, right?" Fong Min laughed. Poplar Fruit was stunned. He thought about it and realized that he really hadn't posted on Weibo for a long time. Since he confirmed his relationship with Fong Beibei, he was either busy or with Fong Beibei. For so long, it seemed that he had only posted on Weibo once. That was when Fong Beibei braided Kiki's hair, and then Poplar Fruit took a cute photo of the little girl in front of the mirror. "Also, you haven't called her since you came to Bali, right?" Fong Min said with some disappointment. "How can this be? You're a man, so you have to take the initiative." Poplar Fruit touched his nose again awkwardly. After he arrived in Bali, he called Fong Beibei and his parents, Zheng Yujia, Song Juwen, and his teachers and friends who were concerned about him. In fact, he also told them on WeChat, but he didn't call them. After all, International long-distance calls were expensive, weren't they? Well, no more excuses. He was just lazy, so he didn't call them. Poplar Fruit promised Fong Min again and again that he would call Zheng Yujia when he went back. When Renaud drove the car, Poplar Fruit asked him to send Fong Min back, and then told him that he would walk tomorrow, so he didn't need him to send him. Mr. Leon, I could have come earlier, Renaud said expressionlessly. No, I'm not blaming you. Poplar Fruit laughed. It's just a short distance. I can walk by myself, drive less, walk more, and promote a low-carbon economy. Poplar Fruit was joking with a sentence from the French government report. However, Renaud didn't respond to his witty words at all. He said with a straight face, I'll report to Mr. Ardle. After the two boring people left, Poplar Fruit held Kiki's hand and walked around the street leisurely. Speaking of the Champs-Élysées, it was known as the most beautiful street in all of France. Although Poplar Fruit was now in the high-end business district in the west section, he was still attracted by the magnificent night view. The lights were brilliant, and the classical buildings were also blooming with modern splendor. The light gray granite sidewalk with small blue dots was very wide. In China, it could be used as 2 lanes. There were street lamps, benches, kiosks, and poster posts. The artistic redesign of the road maintained the elegant and solemn style of the Champs-Élysées. Looking from afar, it seemed to be the intersection of the past, the present, and the future, making people feel dazzled. Through the dazzling display windows, you could see a variety of well-known international brands. Here, there were not only high-end fashion and perfume stores such as Givenchy and LV, but also high-end car galleries such as Mercedes-Benz, Renault, and Poplar Fruit's favorite Land Rover. Not only that, many famous cinema companies, high-end restaurants, and even some top entertainment venues were stationed here. However, Poplar Fruit didn't want to go in. Hi, children. Poplar Fruit was holding his mobile phone and recording a video. I'm Teacher Poplar Fruit. Kiki would like to say hello to everyone. Kiki looked at the camera and waved her small hand happily. Until now, her father had taken many photos of her. The little girl had a good sense of the camera. If Poplar Fruit hadn't stopped quickly, Kiki would have snatched her father's mobile phone. Well, Teacher Poplar Fruit is now in Bali, France. Do you remember the Bali that I told you before? Poplar Fruit smiled and moved his mobile phone to take photos of the street. Then he said into the microphone of the mobile phone, Teacher will now take you to visit the most famous Champs-Élysées in Bali. The burst of inspiration to record a video for the children was not accidental. Poplar Fruit had wanted to do this for a long time, but he had been so busy recently that he didn't think of it. Today, Fong Min told Poplar Fruit that he hadn't posted on Weibo for a long time. When Poplar Fruit took out his mobile phone to take a few photos and post on Weibo, he suddenly thought of this. Well, after seeing the Arc de Triomphe, today's tour of Bali with Poplar Fruit has come to an end. See you next time. Poplar Fruit said to the camera with a smile. Nearly an hour, they played for about 2 kilometers. Kiki was tired and yawned while holding his arm. It's time to go back and rest. As for the video, I'll send it to Lin Xingshan. The little girl is very enthusiastic. Recently, she has been teaching the children in Xiong Village. She will show it to the children. Chapter 714. He wanted to call Zheng Yujia the next day, but he didn't expect her to call him first. You? Why did you wake up so early to call me? Poplar Fruit looked at the time. It was 11 o'clock in the evening in Bali, but in Beijing, it was only 6 o'clock. Poplar Fruit knew that Zheng Yujia always slept late and woke up late. She was able to get up before 8 o'clock because she was working so hard. Zheng Yujia's voice was lazy, as if she had not woken up yet. She yawned as she spoke. Because you don't have time at other times. If you don't call now, don't you want to rest later? Stunned for a moment, Poplar Fruit felt warm in his heart. He was not really a block of wood. He was touched by Zheng Yujia's concern. Why aren't you talking? Are you disconnected? Oh, no. Poplar Fruit could imagine Zheng Yujia curling up in bed, struggling to lift the earpiece to her face, and then squinting her eyes to look at it. Poplar Fruit smiled and said softly, No, I'm thinking about something. What are you thinking about? Zheng Yujia asked casually. Are you unhappy abroad? Why do you think so? Poplar Fruit was stunned for a moment and asked in amusement. Hey, do you still want to think about it? Zheng Yujia's voice was still a little hoarse, as she had just woken up. Why did you go to Bali to be a model? That's not what you're good at. It's different from being a translator. You can go anywhere, but being a model, that circle is messy and dirty. There are a lot of unspoken rules. Plus, you're from another country, so it's definitely difficult for you to survive. Poplar Fruit was silent for a moment. He knew that it was not Fong Min who tipped him off. The timing was not right. However, what Zheng Yujia said was not unreasonable. He was indeed in a quagmire and could not move an inch. To him, modeling was like a book without words. In the past, Poplar Fruit had never paid attention to it. This industry was too far away from him. Poplar Fruit had never thought that he would one day walk on the catwalk under the spotlight. Even before coming to Bali, Poplar Fruit didn't think that being a model was difficult. It wasn't just a walk on the runway. Only now did he realize the gap between himself and those top models. The gap was too big, just like the gap between Yang Cheng and Li. Even if he tried his best to catch up, he still wasn't confident. Don't you see that Poplar Fruit is revising the posture that Barber taught him during the day while he's on the phone? It's all right. It's not a big deal. When Zheng Yujia saw that Poplar Fruit was silent for a long time, she thought that she had provoked him. She smiled and said, "If you really can't do it, come back to China. Big sister will protect you." Poplar Fruit smiled and said, "I know you are very resourceful." Well, you guessed right. It is indeed a little difficult. However, when have you ever seen me retreat when facing difficulties? Don't worry. The more difficult it is, the more I want to challenge it. The more the people look down on us, the more we have to do our best and ruthlessly slap their faces, right? In the past, Poplar Fruit's image was gentle and calm. Zheng Yujia had never heard Poplar Fruit say such domineering words. This time, it was her turn to be stunned. Poplar Fruit's words made her fall once again. This is the kind of man I like. Gentle and considerate to his family, domineering and responsible to the outside world. Today, when she called Poplar Fruit, Zheng Yujia wanted Poplar Fruit to give her an idea. After registering and setting up the publishing house, Peng Yu split up with her subordinates. Her subordinates continued to stay in Guangzhou and purchase the publishing house that she chose. Then, she led a few assistants to Shanghai and Beijing to negotiate with the established online novel websites that Poplar Fruit gave her. Do you think we should buy all the foreign language copyrights, or just pick the ones that you ticked? Zheng Yujia said, "It's not expensive to buy them all. Let's talk about a certain point. We can buy all the foreign language copyrights for 100 million. So cheap?" Poplar Fruit asked in surprise. Just looking at the premium novels, there were tens of thousands of them. Even if there were only 10,000 novels that could be translated into foreign languages and published, it would only cost 10,000 each. This was the price of cabbages. The other party felt that no matter where the foreign language copyrights were, no one believed that it could really be sold overseas. Since someone was willing to buy, they were ecstatic. Zheng Yujia smiled. Auntie Pang said that we can even lower the price. Really? Someone is so short-sighted? Poplar Fruit shook his head in disbelief. That's not it. One of the founders had a different opinion. He said that he wanted to cooperate with us and share the profits. Zheng Yujia said, however, their CEO didn't agree. It seems that they have recently submitted an application to the New York Stock Exchange to plan for an IPO, which is to be listed. If they can sell the copyrights for a large profit, it will be very helpful for them to pass the review of the Securities and Exchange Commission. Poplar Fruit smiled. That's good. We could take advantage of this loophole. I just want to know, which option do you think is better? 100 million for a package, or 10 million for those fantasy novels that you want? Zheng Yujia said, if you want a package, there are many urban novels. I don't think these books will be easy to be accepted by the foreign market. Each has its pros and cons. Poplar Fruit smiled. But now is the time to buy things at the price of cabbages. It's like enclosing land. Let's take advantage of the low price and buy it first. If we can't translate it, we can store it. If 1/10 of these books, no, it should be 100th or 1,000th of them can be sold, we will make a profit. Poplar Fruit wasn't exaggerating. 1,000th was placed in front of a huge novel library, and there were thousands of works. If one in 1,000 was chosen, it would definitely be a masterpiece. Even if they excluded those that were not suitable for the foreign market, it would still be a treasure trove that would take several years, or even more than 10 years to digest. You're right. Zhang Yujia nodded and said, then I'll contact Annie Pang later and ask her to lower the price. We could buy all of them as soon as possible. Anyway, their capital flow was relatively abundant. Spending 100 million wouldn't hurt them. Poplar Fruit smiled and said, you have to set the penalty higher. By the way, not only that, you also have to pay attention to the female market. Bring back more excellent works. It doesn't matter if the price is higher. This is the trump card for our publishing house to compete with other publishing giants in the future. Don't worry, Zhang Yujia said proudly. Unless they raise the price, how high can the foreign language copyright of online novels be? Even if they raise the price, we are not afraid. In the face of strong power, there are probably not many companies that would not do things according to the market rules. After talking about business, Poplar Fruit also talked to Zhang Yujia about his experience in Bali, including his makeup, rehearsals, and various kinds of life experiences. As they talked, Poplar Fruit found that there was no sound on the other side of the phone. When he listened carefully, only Zhang Yujia's steady breathing could be heard. She fell asleep. Poplar Fruit's mouth curved up slightly. He hung up the phone and let Zhang Yujia continue to sleep. Poplar Fruit himself didn't sleep so early. According to his habit, he did 2 hours of translation before climbing into bed to rest. Chapter 7:15. In the morning, Poplar Fruit got up earlier. Like before, he went to the gym to exercise for more than an hour, and then went back to the room to wake up Kiki. He even took Chi-Chi to practice a few rounds of clumsy fist, half playing and half practicing. Bim boxing was the set of moves that Poplar Fruit created in Xiong Village, and it was still being improved. The name was given by Kiki, and the full name given by the little guy was Smart Kiki Benbin Boxing. Poplar Fruit felt that this name was shameless, so he only took the last part. What Poplar Fruit didn't know was that less than a quarter of an hour after he left the gym, Princess Charlotte, who was full of curiosity, also appeared at the door. However, she was destined to be disappointed. She opened the door, but the gym was empty. He stood me up? Princess Charlotte indignantly vented her anger on the treadmill. It's not easy to get up so early, but he actually didn't come. Was he really scared away? Forget it. I'm too lazy to pay attention to this guy. Princess Charlotte was busy, and she was not bored enough to track down an Oriental person every day. How come there's no car today? Kiki took her father's hand and walked with him on the winding path of Bali. Not all roads in Bali were as wide as the Champs-Élysées. There were also many beautiful footpaths paved with cobblestones, which were completely European style. Under the morning sun, the glazed windows, the octagonal street lamps, and even the black bronze benches were shining brightly. The quiet paths were filled with a kind of French romantic atmosphere. Because it's faster to walk. Poplar Fruit laughed. You see, such a beautiful place. If we take a car, won't we miss it? In order to let his daughter learn French, Poplar Fruit also spoke in French, and then slowly analyzed it for Kiki. Oui. Kiki nodded obediently. Poplar Fruit suddenly felt that next time, he must take Fong Bei to such a beautiful place. Fong Bei would definitely like such a quiet and elegant European scenery. And the big manor mentioned by Ardal, when could he ride a horse and pick grapes with the girl he liked? What a wonderful thing it would be. When they arrived at the club, Poplar Fruit was the first one to arrive. The uncle who opened the door for him said that for so many years, he had never seen a child as diligent as Poplar Fruit. Why did the uncle remember him? That was because Yonghua was also the last to leave yesterday. The uncle didn't know that Yonghua wasn't a real model. In his opinion, anyone who could enter Gavinci's door wouldn't be bad. Come, you're the best. The unknown uncle encouraged Poplar Fruit. Of course, the uncle was not a hidden NPC like a Shaolin monk. He couldn't turn Poplar Fruit from a rookie to a godlike model with just a few words. Poplar Fruit had to continue to work hard to change everything. Since the others hadn't arrived yet, Poplar Fruit didn't change his clothes. He just put on his shoes and walked on the runway. 1, 2, 2, 1. Yang Guizheng repeated the rhythm to himself, and then repeatedly practiced the basic steps that Barbara had taught him yesterday. In his opinion, these steps were not practical at all. They were just like the complicated Tai Chi moves he had seen in the past. They were designed purely for aesthetics. What else could they do? With this model steps, he would be lucky if he didn't trip himself, let alone fight with others. Of course, with Poplar Fruit's coordination and sense of balance, he wouldn't make such a low-level mistake. Papa, Papa! Chi-Chi didn't sit by the side to help her father look at things. Instead, she ran to the side of the runway in her little shoes. However, the runway was too high for her. Her little hand was raised high, but only half of her finger was above the table and barely hooked onto the runway. She could only hear the sound, but not see the person. Poplar Fruit walked over and squatted on the edge of the runway. He asked with a smile, "Kiki, what are you going to do?" "Papa, hug." Kiki raised her head. Her big eyes looked pitiful. She raised her two little hands and twirled her head like a flower. Poplar Fruit stretched out his long arms and held his daughter's armpits. He lifted Kiki up gently. It was like riding a roller coaster. Suddenly, she flew into her father's arms. "Ha ha, it's so fun." Kiki put her arms around her father's neck. She felt a little dizzy, but Kiki wasn't afraid at all. Instead, she liked it very much. "Okay." Poplar Fruit patted Kiki's little head and kissed her face. He said, "Papa is going to practice. I'll play with Kiki when I have time." "Well, Kiki wants to play." Kiki turned her head. "Papa, can you take Kiki to play with you?" It was so boring to sit under the stage. She looked left and right, but no one was talking to Kiki. "It's not impossible." Poplar Fruit thought for a moment and said, "Kiki can watch from Papa's side. When Papa is practicing, Kiki can't disturb Papa's movements because Papa has no space to hug." Poplar Fruit could do two things at the same time to accompany Kiki. However, in order to not change his movements, he couldn't hug Kiki to practice. Kiki will be very obedient. Kiki cutely hugged her father's face and kissed him. She said in a soft voice. Kiki slid down from her father's arms. She stood beside her father on the tea stage and curiously looked at her father's various strange stances. Poplar Fruit had actually been paying attention to Kiki. He was worried that Kiki would accidentally fall down the tea stage. It must be known that a child's attention was not like an adult's. She was easily attracted by something and then forgot about the danger. Poplar Fruit saw Kiki strolling around and stopped at his right side. She twisted her little butt, held her round belly, and imitated her father's movements. Aya. Kiki's sense of balance was far worse than her father's. Moreover, her movements were not standard. She accidentally hooked her own supporting leg and staggered and fell on her, but Poplar Fruit resisted the urge to immediately carry Kiki. He wanted to see if Kiki could get up on her own. How could a tiger father have a dog son? Kiki looked delicate, but in fact, her physical fitness was as good as her father's. Not to mention other things. Ever since Poplar Fruit left a trace of vitality seed in her body, Kiki had never caught a cold or fell sick. In fact, Chi-Chi was able to quickly adapt to the high altitude and humid Xiong village in the middle of summer. She could run with her two little legs, and none of the children of the same age or even 2 years older than her could outrun her. Kiki, Kiki. Chi-Chi maintained her sitting posture and laughed to herself. The little fellow had fallen down, but he still thought that he was cute. Chapter 716. Babla also came early, but this might be her habit. She and Poplar Fruit were both hard-working people. On the 7th floor, some models had already rushed over with their teams. They also wanted to leave a good impression on the instructors. Moreover, they came so early for makeup and could go on stage earlier, so they had 1 or 2 more rehearsals than the others. "Leon, you have improved again," Babla said happily. "You can actually integrate hip shaking, but lifting and other movements into your standing posture. Very good, very good." In fact, these are not difficult for Poplar Fruit. Poplar fruit could do the most complicated martial arts movements, so this little difficulty was nothing. However, in Babla's eyes, poplar fruit's progress was like sitting on a jet. One day was equivalent to a year's progress for others. After Babla came, poplar fruit was embarrassed to let Kiki stay on stage to cause trouble. Although he could ensure that he could study efficiently, Kiki was still next to Babla, so it would still affect her. Poplar fruit did not want to leave a bad impression on Babla. He hoped that Fong Min could come to help take care of Kiki, but Fong Min was the last to arrive. She was not late, as she arrived before 9 o'clock. However, compared to Matisse and Victor, who had arrived early, there was a difference. Speaking of which, Martis and Victor were usually lazy, and they only came over in the afternoon yesterday. Why did they rush over so early today? What is Matisse doing? Yangwo was pressed down on the chair by Victor to fix her hair. Out of the corner of his eye, he glanced at Martis, who was on his right. He seemed to be fiddling with some machine to install a video recorder. Victor laughed. Video recorder? Recording what? Poplar fruit vaguely knew the answer, but he still blurted it out. I'm recording you. After installing the tripod and fixing the DV, Martis walked over and smiled at Poplar fruit. Yesterday, I told Mr. Artle that you were a genius, so Mr. Artle asked us to film your training. What's there to film? Poplar fruit said weakly. Film me making a fool of myself? You don't have to be humble, although I know you Chinese like to be humble. Matisse laughed and said, You are the most talented new model I have ever seen. I observed you for a long time yesterday. If you record it, you might be able to use it as evidence to witness your miracle. Barbara popped out from Poplar fruit's side and nodded with a hint of hope. Mr. Matisse is right. Leon, we have faith in you. However, you don't have to put too much pressure on yourself. Just study at your own pace. I hope your camera won't cause Leon any trouble. If Leon feels that he is under too much pressure, I can ask them not to show it in front of you. Barbara said seriously. That won't happen. That won't happen, right, Leon? Matisse laughed dryly. Before Poplar fruit could reply, he turned around and saw Kiki standing next to his tripod and looking at it curiously. He immediately cried out in horror, Little angel, my lady, don't touch it, it'll break. Matisse ran over and picked up Kiki. Kiki was not afraid. She pinched Matisse's nose and stuttered in simple French. Sir, my name is Lorgiel. Chi-Chi was quite concerned about her own name. Huh. Matisse had no experience in raising a child. He was sweating profusely as he played with Kiki. Fortunately, Fong Min arrived in time and rescued the helpless Matisse. Kiki, look at what I brought for you. Fong Min took out a big book from a big bag and then took out a colorful box. Girls loved colorful things the most, and Chi-Chi was the same. When she turned around to look, she immediately abandoned Martis and ran over happily. She stuck her head out and asked curiously, Andy, what is this? This is a coloring book. Fong Min smiled as she flipped through the large book on the table. Inside, there were some blank drawings of small animals on the white cardboard. Of course, on the upper left corner of each page, there was a miniaturized full-color drawing. Fong Min opened the box. There were 36 crayons of different colors neatly arranged inside. Kiki's eyes lit up immediately. Fong Min smiled and said, These are crayons. Do you see those blank drawings? Kiki will take the crayons and color them later to make those small animals look better. Are they really for Kiki? Kiki still couldn't believe it. She blinked her big watery eyes, and the desire in her heart had long been expressed on her face. Of course, Fong Min smiled. As soon as her voice fell, Kiki immediately cheered happily and ran to her father's side. She pulled on her father's trousers and told him about her excitement. Kiki is going to draw. Draw big flowers and draw beautiful sheep. Poplar fruit had just finished doing his hair. He looked at Fong Min gratefully and said, Sister Fong Min, you are really considerate. Poplar fruit was also grateful to those who treated his daughter well from the bottom of his heart. Fong Min smiled and said, Yesterday, I saw Kiki looking at the iPad all the time. This isn't very good for children. I read a book before. It said that children age 0 to 7 should use their hands and brains more instead of passively receiving some information by watching videos. That's why I bought this coloring book. In a strange city like Bali, Fong Min found such exquisite coloring book and crayons for Kiki in just one night. There must be a lot of difficulties that Fong Min didn't explain to Poplar Fruit. Poplar Fruit cared enough about Kiki, but as a man, there were many aspects that he didn't consider thoroughly. He humbly accepted Fong Min's teachings and remembered it in his heart. In the future, he would let Kiki watch less cartoons and let her come into contact with more novel things to cultivate Kiki's ability to use her hands and brains. Seeing Kiki happily studying her new toys on the table and Fong Min giving her some hints and guidance from time to time, Poplar Fruit felt relieved. He didn't have so much time to take care of Kiki. It was good enough that Fong Min was there. Poplar Fruit went back to the back of the tea stage to change clothes and then began a new day of learning. Seeing Poplar Fruit and Barbara walking on the tea stage, Matisse and Victor looked at each other and smiled knowingly. The two guys intimately held each other's waists and leaned in front of the DV camera. As if they were recording the opening speech, the two laughed and reached out one hand to the camera, bending their ring finger and middle finger. "Ladies and gentlemen," Matisse waved his hand and said. He said one sentence, and Victor followed suit. "Next is the reality show, Leon's show," Matisse said in a low voice. "You will see a genius, a new genius model with talent that even God would be jealous of. We will witness his growth." Victor added, "Now, the miracle begins." Matisse and Victor separated and pointed at Poplar Fruit. Well, fortunately, Poplar Fruit didn't see it. Otherwise, he would have been shocked by their exaggerated performance. Chapter 717. The seventh floor of the Givenchy Hall was noisy to begin with. The music of the catwalk was loud and clear, and because there were so many venues and so many models and their assistants, a single word from each of them could turn the entire floor into a wet market. Poplar Fruit's area was relatively quiet because it was relatively remote and there were few people there. However, the noise was definitely not normal. The models on the runway next door were not in the mood to walk. The music was still playing, but they were still rushing forward. The cheers were too loud. This formation was similar to when Martis and Victor came here for the first time. However, the momentum was much greater. Could it be that some superstar had come? Why are they so excited? The only ones who were not affected were Poplar Fruit and Kiki. Yang Guo was concentrating on his studies, devoting himself to the adjustment of his bones and the control of his muscles. Perhaps at this moment, only Chi-Chi's voice could wake him up from the world of the tea stage. It was not that he had not tried it before. In the morning, Chi-Chi held her crayon drawings and ran to show her father, and Yang Guo had to stop his practice. Kiki, of course, followed her father's example. She was also very focused when she was doing something she liked. In the afternoon, when she woke up, she started a new journey. This time, she wanted to draw a big wolf for her father. For this, Aunt Fong Min asked her to drink water several times, but Kiki was very impatient. However, even though Poplar Fruit was very serious, he could not concentrate anymore because Barbara's attention was attracted to the drawing. "Where's the teacher?" Poplar Fruit was very confused. He followed Barbara's gaze and saw a little princess in a princess dress, accompanied by an elegantly dressed man. They walked through the crowd and walked to the runway. "Oh, Princess Luo Danny is the darling of Givenchy." Barbara clasped her hands over her heart and had an intoxicated look on her face, causing Yang Guo to shudder in disgust. "Is it really Artel's granddaughter, Luo Danny?" Givenchy was here. Accompanying her was their family's ever-smiling and courteous butler. Poplar Fruit admitted that he didn't have a good impression of the rigid butler, but he didn't provoke him. What he said that day was just to fulfill his duty. If it were someone else, he would still say the same thing. Poplar Fruit didn't know that the reason why these people were so excited about Luo Danny was not only because she was Artel's granddaughter, but also because Luo Danny was a high-priced fashion spokesperson. Although Luo Danny was young and a little shy, she was indeed a little beauty. Her mother had been rated as the most beautiful face in the fashion industry more than 10 years ago. Luo Danny had also inherited her mother's beauty and received a top-notch aristocratic education from a young age. At such a young age, she had already starred in 3 commercials. Among them, the most famous one was when she endorsed the world-class watch and jewelry company, Cartier's new diamond necklace last year. The little girl was still young, but she was already the darling of the fashion world. Yang Guo was such an old uncle, but compared to him, he was far from being comparable. When they saw Luo Danny and the others walking over, the group of people behind wanted to follow them. However, the butler smiled and gestured for them to go back. A few of the senior instructors didn't dare to continue flattering Luo Danny. Under everyone's gaze, Luo Danny lifted her skirt and walked to the side of the runway. She looked up and asked softly, "Mr. Leon, may I ask where the angel is? I want to play with her." Poplar Fruit was a little embarrassed. He walked over and jumped down from the stage. He couldn't let my daughter look up at him all the time, right? Of course, even if he jumped down, Luo Danny still had to look up at him. Poplar Fruit saw the butler's murderous gaze and awkwardly withdrew his hand that was about to touch her head. "Isn't she here?" Poplar Fruit pointed to Kiki, who was immersed in her own painting world, and called out with a smile. Kiki's 2 white little hands each held a crayon. She had accidentally drawn a black line on her face, but Fongmin wiped it clean when she saw it. Hearing her father's call, Kiki subconsciously covered the coloring book with her arms. The little girl felt that it was better not to let her father see the unfinished painting. Looking up, Kiki shouted happily, "Luo Danny." It wasn't that Kiki didn't call her sister, but that Westerners generally called people they were familiar with by their names, which made them feel closer. Luo Danny's long skirt was a restraint for her running. After a long time, she slowly moved to the front of Kiki. Kiki had already reached out and called out to her, "Luo Danny, let me show you." Fongmin could no longer stay calm. She gave up her position in fear and stood behind the chair to carefully protect it. With her help, Luo Danny lifted her skirt and sat on the chair. She even said thank you to her, which made Fongmin a little flattered. "Wow, is this your painting?" Although Luo Danny was a celebrity, she still had the character of my daughter. When she saw Kiki open the coloring book, she covered her mouth and asked in surprise, "Yes and no." Kiki thought for a moment and said, "The painting was given to Lorgiel by Auntie, and these colors were painted by Kiki." Of course, there were some complicated explanations that Kiki couldn't understand, even in English. She also supplemented it with body movements. Luo Danny had long been accustomed to this kind of communication with Kiki and understood at a glance. "Oh, it's so beautiful," Luo Danny said with some envy. "By the way, who is Lorgiel?" "Lorgiel is me. My name is Lorgiel." Kiki said the last sentence in French. "Dad gave me the name." "Luo Danny, do you want to draw?" The little girl changed the topic so fast that Fongmin, who was next to her, was a little dizzy. Luo Danny excitedly took Kiki's crayons and happily said, "Okay, which one should I draw for sister?" Kiki leaned on the table and flipped through the coloring book, pondering, in addition to this big wolf, which one does sister like to draw? Big wolf was Kiki's favorite. She was reluctant to share it with others. "What is big wolf?" "Wow, I like this big white bear." Luo Danny was no longer a lady. She happily held Kiki's hand and shouted, "How is it a big white bear?" "It's obviously a polar bear." My daughters began to play with their drawings as if there was no one else around. In fact, Luo Danny's skin was thin, and she was usually very reserved outside. However, she also had a playful heart. Under the influence of Kiki, Luo Danny also became lively. Seeing that they were having fun, Poplar Fruit also felt relieved and went back to the tea stage to continue to study. As for the other people's strange looks, Poplar Fruit naturally disdained to care. Chapter 718. So that Asian man has such a background. Originally, the discussion about Poplar Fruit on the 7th floor had gradually died down. After all, everyone had their own things to do. However, Luo Danny's arrival put Poplar Fruit in the center of a whirlpool once again. Of course, They only dared to whisper among a few people. With the Givenchy family around, they didn't dare to slander him loudly unless they didn't want their jobs anymore. He just relied on his connections to get to where he is. Who knows if he betrayed us? Their words were still unpleasant, and all kinds of malicious guesses were exchanged among them. Didn't you see his clumsy performance? I was 100 times better than him when I first went on stage when I was 15. Does that yellow monkey think he can become a model just by relying on his connections? He's too naive. I think we should join forces to boycott him. Forget it. Can an arm be stronger than a thigh? Someone said disdainfully. Speaking of connections, didn't the little princess also rely on her connections? The little girl hasn't even grown up yet, and she's already in a big commercial. I really don't know what he's thinking. This was a female model. When she said this, the air was filled with a sour smell. Oh, master, you should be careful. If word gets out, you don't want to stay in this industry anymore? Her assistant pulled her back nervously. I think we should just let him show off. In the modeling industry, strength is everything. If he goes on stage like this, Givenchy will be the one to lose face. Another circle was secretly discussing. I'm looking forward to going on stage with this yellow monkey, someone said with a laugh. Why? Everyone loathed Yonghua, yet his words were so shocking that they couldn't understand. Without the contrast of failure, how can there be the brilliance of a pearl? He proudly raised his head and said, if I go on stage with him, the worse he performs, the better the audience will think I perform. Everyone's eyes lit up, and their hearts began to stir. Poplar Fruit still didn't know that his image among the models had fallen again and again. He had completely degenerated into a clumsy villain who only knew how to rely on his connections to get to where he was. However, even if Poplar Fruit knew about it, he wouldn't take it to heart. No matter how bad their opinion of him was, Poplar Fruit would not try to change it. These people were not important in Poplar Fruit's heart. He was more concerned about becoming a model worthy of Artel's trust. Perhaps, using strength instead of words to give them a slap in the face would be more satisfying. Luo Danny, why didn't you come over yesterday? Kiki handed a crayon to Luo Danny and also helped her draw a few strokes. Luo Danny wasn't as good as Kiki. She couldn't draw and talk at the same time. She paused for a moment, turned to Kiki and said, because I have to go to class. Oh. Are you going to class like Chi-Chi's daddy? Chi-Chi took the opportunity to draw a few more strokes. After she succeeded, her big eyes narrowed into slits as she grinned. Oh, Lordiel, you cheated. Luo Danny grabbed Kiki's wrist and shouted angrily. I have a tutor. I have to learn Latin, horse riding, and etiquette. It's so annoying. The little girl pouted and said irritably, I want to play with you, but the housekeeper won't let me play. I can't come out until after class in the morning. Annoying to study? Kiki scratched her head, not quite understanding Luo Danny's troubles. She said in a childish voice, no. Kiki's daddy taught Kiki to speak French. Kiki thought it was very interesting. Luo Danny said with some envy, your daddy is so good. He must be a very gentle and kind person. Hearing others praise her daddy, Kiki laughed happily. She proudly puffed out her chest and said, yes, Kiki's daddy is the best daddy in the world. The two of them drew for a while. Kiki asked, Luo Danny, will you come play with Kiki in the future? Drawing alone was definitely not as fun as drawing with friends. Luo Danny thought for a moment. She pouted with some uncertainty and said, I don't know yet. I don't know if there are any more trips. I may need to go to Switzerland to participate in some business activities, or I may be asked to stay at home to study by my teacher. I also want to come and play with you, Kiki. Although they didn't speak the same language, Luo Danny felt that Kiki, who was 6 years younger than her, was already her best friend. She was different from her other companions. Chi-Chi was very sincere and unpretentious to her, and she had many wonderful experiences, the difference between the East and the West. When she played with Chi-Chi, she didn't need to wear a mask or pretend to be a lady. In any case, every minute and every second was happy. Kiki was a little unhappy. She took Luo Danny's hand, and the two of them looked like good sisters. She said in a soft voice, but Kiki wants to play with Luo Danny. Luo Danny, don't go, okay? Luo Danny was a little embarrassed. She thought for a moment and said, "No, my butler is very bad. If I don't go, he will tell my daddy." "So bad?" Kiki asked Daddy to beat him. Kiki indignantly looked at the butler, who was standing straight in the distance with a white towel in his hand. She felt that these guys were as bad as Big Bad Wolf. Luo Danny covered her mouth and laughed. She didn't take it seriously, and she didn't think that Kiki's father was very powerful. However, she was still very moved by Kiki's action of protecting her friend. She took Kiki's hand and said, "Kiki, why don't you come with me? Come to my house as a guest, and we can go play together, right?" "But Daddy is not free." Kiki was a little moved. She looked at her father and shook her head regretfully. "It doesn't matter. You tell your father that you will come to my house as a guest for a few days. When you want to go home, you can ask your father to pick you up," Luo Danny said. "I often go to my aunt's house to play." Kiki shook her head without thinking and said, "No, Kiki doesn't want to leave Daddy." If going to Luo Danny's house to play was a tempting cake, then staying by her father's side was a dreamy candy city. Although Kiki liked to play, she didn't dare to imagine how uncomfortable it would be for her to leave her father. One must know that since she was born, except for 1 or 2 times when Sister Bebe came to take care of her, Kiki almost never left her father for a whole day, especially at night. If her father didn't tell her a bedtime story, Kiki wouldn't be able to sleep. Luo Danny was a little regretful. She sighed like an adult and said, "I really don't know what to do with you. You can't leave Daddy just like a child." "Kiki is child," Kiki said with a smile. "Luo Danny, don't be angry. If Daddy is free, Kiki will definitely come and play with you." Luo Danny patted Kiki's little head. At this time, she said like an elder sister, "Well, Kiki, don't worry. If I have time, I will ask the housekeeper to send me here to draw with you." Chapter 719. For the past few days, Poplar Fruit had been practicing day and night. Only in the afternoon would he sneak out and use Matisse's DV to record videos for the children. At this time, Poplar Fruit did not look like he was traveling. Instead, he looked more like a tour guide introducing the local customs and customs of a foreign country to the children. Although it was quite tiring, the children's enthusiastic reactions made Yonghua feel happier and happier than if she were to play alone. Speaking of which, Poplar Fruit was a little regretful. If he had not known the children so late, he would have set up an award for the children who improved quickly to come to Bali to experience the atmosphere of a foreign country, instead of giving the quota to the 2 girls in the French class. Of course, this was just a fleeting thought. Poplar Fruit seriously considered the possibility of this matter. He suddenly felt that this idea was not necessarily a good thing. After all, the difference was too big. Those children lived in the mountains, just like most Chinese people. They might not have the opportunity to step out of the country in their lifetime. If they were to be impacted by the extravagant lifestyle of a foreign country, they might not have the heart to study when they returned. They should not study so hard for the sake of the award he set up. This goal was wrong. Leaving a memento, allowing them to work hard to surpass themselves and rely on their own abilities to obtain the life they wanted in the future. This was the purpose of Poplar Fruit's long-distance education. Poplar Fruit was very tough. When Fong Bei and Poplar Fruit video chatted, she also said that she blamed Poplar Fruit for working too hard. He had become tanned and thin. In fact, Poplar Fruit was not that miserable. He was not tanned, but he was a little thinner. That was because Babla asked him to restrict his diet for the sake of shape. He had to eat those nutritious meals that were hard to swallow. Then, he practiced day and night. During this period, no matter how tough it was, Poplar Fruit would go to the gym to practice boxing. He also used his brain. Entering a new field, Poplar Fruit had too much to learn and think about. Of course, he would be a little thinner. However, his body was one step closer to the golden ratio. Fong Bei's worry and heartache were because of love. When Poplar Fruit told her about his training, he didn't dare to tell her the truth. Even so, Fong Bei still shed tears of heartache. As a result, Poplar Fruit only dared to report the good news and not the bad news. No matter how much pain and grievances men suffered outside, they had to grit their teeth and bear it by themselves. How could they bring it back and let a woman bear it with them? This was not male chauvinism. This was also love. Because of love, Poplar Fruit had to stand out to block the wind and rain, leaving only the brightest sunshine for Phong Bei Bei. Yes, Poplar Fruit had been through a lot in the past few days in Bali. In other words, he had become the center of the whirlpool in the fashion industry of Bali and even the world. Even Givenchy was controversial. Because of him, it wasn't the criticism of the models. If it was just the criticism and slander of the models, Yangwo wouldn't have been affected. One day, as usual, he went to the hall to practice with Barbara. When Matisse and the others arrived, they handed Poplar Fruit several fashion newspapers with a gloomy face. With Poplar Fruit's language ability, it was no problem for him to understand these newspapers. He didn't even need to open them. Almost every headline was about him. Fashion degenerates into vanity. Exposure. Givenchy will do anything to open up the Eastern market. Bali Fashion Week does not welcome trashy models who rely on connections. Who is he? Is Givenchy the lover of a big shot? The news came from a model's Twitter account. He had secretly taken some photos of Poplar Fruit's training. Although the photos were taken from a distance and his face was a bit blurry, the photos were taken when Poplar Fruit had just started. From the photos, it could be seen that Poplar Fruit was walking on the runway unsteadily, like a clumsy Donald Duck. Assistant Director Jacques had come to see Poplar Fruit's training yesterday and scolded Poplar Fruit with disdain. Then he accidentally revealed the inside story that Poplar Fruit had unconditionally occupied a spot in the main show. This caused an uproar on the 7th floor and also caused the model who had exposed the news to be indignant. After he posted Yangwo's photo with exaggerated details, he probably regretted it after causing such a huge uproar. In less than 2 hours, he deleted it himself. However, many people had already reposted them. Even if he deleted them, the photos had already been saved. His Twitter account had also been screenshotted. Even if Givenchy wanted to settle the matter through public relations, it was impossible. Therefore, Poplar Fruit saw these newspapers the next day. In these newspapers, the reporters at most had photos of Poplar Fruit, but they didn't know who Poplar Fruit was at all. One newspaper even guessed that Poplar Fruit was the Prince of China. There was also a newspaper that was very offensive. It used racial slurs to smear Poplar Fruit and the yellow people behind him. It even said disdainfully, "Those yellow people in East Asia are uncivilized. What do they know about fashion?" Does Givenchy think that it can open up the Eastern market by inviting an Asian to walk on the runway? It has insulted the entire fashion industry and turned Bali Fashion Week into a money-grubbing fashion week. Not only were they cursing Yangwo, but because of the model's name, Ardal and Givenchy were also criticized and attacked by the media. One of the reporters even shouted, "Ardal, get out of the fashion industry. These bastards." Poplar Fruit clenched his fists. Even though he was usually calm, he was now full of anger. However, when he saw these comments, he felt a little helpless. He wanted to stand up and tell the media that they were wrong. Poplar Fruit couldn't, because at that time, Poplar Fruit still couldn't prove himself with his ability. Although Poplar Fruit felt that he had made rapid progress in the past few days, it was only enough to make him a good model. He might be second-rate in China, but in Bali, or even in front of the models on the 7th floor Givenchy, he was still a nobody. What should I do? The words in the newspaper about Ardal were like knives, engraving in Yangwo's mind, one by one. Closing his eyes, Poplar Fruit struggled. He didn't want to admit defeat, but more than that, he felt endless regret. Opening his eyes, Poplar Fruit looked at Matisse and Victor, who were also in a bad mood. He sighed softly. In his eyes, Poplar Fruit had a trace of determination. Matisse, Poplar Fruit gritted his teeth and said in a low voice, "What does Mr. Ardal want me to do? It doesn't matter. I can quit now. Those newspapers still don't know about my news. If I go back now, no one will know whether this news is true or not. As long as we don't admit it, they won't keep pestering Mr. Ardal." Chapter 720. Why did you quit? An old but still loud voice suddenly rang out. Poplar Fruit was no stranger to this voice. He turned around and saw Ardle striding toward them with his gentleman's crutch. "Mr. Ardle, why are you here?" Martis and Victor quickly stood up from their chairs. They were usually quite arrogant, but when facing their boss, they still had to be obedient. "Of course I'm here. Do you think I, Ardle, will be intimidated by the fabricated reports of these reporters? Did Givenchy give up?" Ardle puffed out his chest proudly. His turbid eyes were shining with the light of disdain for the world. Chi-Chi, who was next to Fong Min, saw Ardle's arrival. She didn't know what had happened, but she was very happy. When Fong Min wasn't paying attention, she skipped over and said, "Sir, is Luo Danny here?" Seeing Kiki, Ardle's face softened a little. He smiled and said, "My lovely angel, I'm so sorry that Luo Danny didn't come today." Kiki sighed regretfully. She pouted and said, "I see. Sir, if you see Luo Danny, please remember to tell her that Kiki misses her very much." In the past few days, under Poplar Fruit's teaching, Kiki's French had improved a lot. She said these words in French, although she stuttered a little and mixed in some English words. "I will," Ardle said with a smile. Poplar Fruit asked Fong Min to take Kiki aside. The conversation was a little heavy, and Poplar Fruit didn't think it was suitable for Kiki to hear. "Ardle, I'm sorry. I'll let you down." Poplar Fruit sighed and looked at Ardle. He and Ardle got along as friends, so there was no need for him to pretend to be humble. However, he also had something to say. Ardle invited him to Bali because he trusted him. Now, because of his lack of strength, Ardle was bombarded. He felt sorry for himself. "What are you sorry for?" Ardle stared at Poplar Fruit, waved his hand, and said, "I'll tell you later." Ardle turned his head and looked at Martis and Victor. His eyes were burning with anger. He gnashed his teeth and said, "Martis, you two are getting worse and worse, aren't you? Did I ask you to come here to threaten and force Leon to go back? Do you still have any respect for your master?" Martis was sweating profusely. He quickly waved his hand and said, "Boss, sir, we didn't threaten or force Leon. We just asked him to read these irritating newspapers." Indeed, when the two of them were fighting for justice, Poplar Fruit suddenly announced that he would quit. Both of them were shocked by Poplar Fruit just now. "Ardle, don't blame Martis. I said I would quit." Poplar Fruit also said for Martis. Ardle was still angry. He immediately turned to Poplar Fruit and said with disappointment, "Leon, how could you say such a thing? Just a few newspapers made you back off?" Poplar Fruit didn't need to be polite with Ardle. He waved the newspaper in his hand and pointed at the article that asked Ardle to leave the fashion circle. He said, "Hey, Ardle, I'm just thinking for you. You're under too much pressure." Ardle pulled the newspaper from Poplar Fruit's hand, tore it in half, and crumpled it into a ball with disdain, and said, "Street tabloids. If Givenchy is afraid of this kind of gossip, we don't need to open our store anymore." Martis said weakly, "Boss, that's the sun." Ardle threw the newspaper ball into Martis's arms, waved his hand, and said, "Throw it away." "Leon, don't worry." Ardle smiled calmly and said, "I'll take care of these outside things. You just need to focus on your training." "Really?" Poplar Fruit frowned and asked. He was not stupid, although Ardle didn't seem to care. Poplar Fruit still felt that this matter was not simple at all. The news that came out now could be big or small. If someone really wanted to hold on to it, it could be treated as a scandal. Could Ardle just ignore the Givenchy board of directors? His name was not Hubert. Duh. Givenchy. He was just a collateral member of the Givenchy family. He was not even the chief designer. Babla. Ardle didn't want to waste time with him. He waved his hand and called Babla over. He looked at the dark-skinned instructor and restrained his aura. Then he said gently, "Babla, I've watched the videos these days. You taught very well. Leon has made great progress." Babla was flattered and said, "Thank you, Mr. Ardle. This is also because Leon is so talented. I just did my job." Ardle tapped his cane and said, "You don't have to be humble like Leon. If I say you taught well, then you taught well." "Yes, sir." Babla lowered her head and said. Ardle turned his head and said to Poplar Fruit, "Leon, I'll take care of the guy who leaked the news." His voice was very serious and firm. He didn't allow Poplar Fruit to plead for mercy. Poplar Fruit hesitated and shook his head. He didn't want to take care of it anymore. But you can't continue to practice here, Ardle said. Mr. Ardle, Babla cried anxiously. She had just seen hope from Poplar Fruit. She hurriedly explained to Ardle, Mr. Ardle, please believe me. Leon can become an excellent supermodel. Please don't, I know. Ardle interrupted her and said, I didn't say that he can't practice here. I mean that he can't practice here. Do you understand? More and more reporters are coming here after hearing the news. Ardle said, we don't have time to waste on those reporters. So Leon and Babla moved to my villa and practice. Matisse suddenly understood. He said admiringly, Boss, you're so wise. We'll tell the public that the report is not true. Then we'll let Leon come out. Then there will be no controversy. Who said I'm going to do that? Ardle hit Matisse's but with his cane and laughed. No, I'm going to admit it. I'll tell them that Leon was chosen by me. He's the most suitable one for my designs. If anyone is not convinced, I'll see you at the Fashion Week. Overbearing and unreasonable, Ardle told everyone with a straight spine that he would never give in. Poplar Fruit was not like what the novelist said. Ardle's trust was like being injected with chicken blood. However, he was still a little touched by his friend's support. Gently hammering Ardle's arm with the outside of his fist, Poplar Fruit also straightened his chest. He looked at Ardle with firm eyes and said loudly, Ardle, don't worry. Your vision will be proven. I promise. Chapter 721. In the morning, Poplar Fruit and Kiki quietly avoided the reporters who hadn't arrived yet. They returned to Shangri-La to pack their things, then got into Hey Bro, Renault's Rolls-Royce, and moved to Ardle's villa. As soon as he left, someone came looking for him. The story started in the morning. She didn't have an itinerary today. As a noble, Princess Charlotte didn't need to rehearse like those models. Gucci didn't even need her to walk for the brand shows. With her fame, it was enough for her to occasionally attend commercial events. So today, she was able to sleep in leisurely and slowly eat breakfast in her room. When Princess Charlotte ate breakfast, she didn't read the newspaper while eating like those middle-aged men in movies. Her good upbringing had taught her to have an elegant eating posture. However, although her posture was elegant, her eyes were sneakily looking around. Princess Charlotte was secretly looking at her two bodyguards, wondering how she could avoid them and sneak out to have fun. If that guy was here, I wouldn't have to rack my brains to avoid Atai and the others. A vigorous shadow that had disappeared for a long time suddenly popped up in Princess Charlotte's head. He's so good at fighting. He knocked down Atai and the rest of them with only a few punches and kicks. Then I can sneak out and go shopping openly. Sometimes speak of the devil. Although Poplar Fruit didn't appear in person, Princess Charlotte saw his photo. Hey, Atai, give me that newspaper. Princess Charlotte put down her spoon and pointed at the newspaper that was neatly placed on the desk. Usually, other than her own reports, she didn't seem to take the initiative to look at the newspaper. Atai looked at Princess Charlotte suspiciously and vigilantly. He knew how troublesome his master was. However, as a bodyguard and servant, Atai dutifully handed over the newspaper. Although the photo was blurry, Princess Charlotte could still distinguish Poplar Fruit's figure. It's really him. Even though she was still unsure, she took a look at the contents of the newspaper. Asians, Givenchy Ardle. These keywords were enough for Princess Charlotte to confirm that this unlucky man was the Tsundere she had met 3 times. That's right, Princess Charlotte called Poplar Fruit a Tsundere. Why? This was because Poplar Fruit had bumped into him 3 times, but he hadn't even tried to strike up a conversation with him once. This had caused Princess Charlotte to doubt her own charm. But now, Princess Charlotte blamed it on Poplar Fruit. This man must be too arrogant. He saw me and pretended not to know me. After all, Princess Charlotte was as well known as Prince William in England and Europe. Do you think this is cool? Princess Charlotte thought indignantly. Looking at the sun, which she usually disdained to care about, Princess Charlotte was secretly delighted. Hee, you've been caught red-handed, haven't you? Princess Charlotte somewhat believed the rumors in the newspaper. Poplar Fruit was a prince of some royal family in Asia. Otherwise, how could he have received Givenchy's favor? Princess Charlotte didn't feel any model aura from him. Although Poplar Fruit's figure was pretty good the first time they met, and Poplar Fruit's hairstyle was a lot better the third time they met. But which country's prince was he from? Brunei, Nepal? That country with a lot of sorcerers also had a prince. However, the royal family of Brunei seemed to be more low-key. The royal families of Southeast Asia and Brunei were ugly and short. They were different from the men she had seen before. Princess Charlotte was curious again. She raised her head and asked Tai, do you remember the Asian man who pressed you to the ground in less than a second? Tai's face darkened. She really touched on his sore spot. That experience could be said to be the most humiliating experience he had ever had as a royal bodyguard. And Princess Charlotte still described it in such detail. What did she mean by less than a second? He didn't dare to look at the strange eyes of his companions. He braced himself and nodded. Didn't you go to investigate him? Do you have the report? Let me see. Princess Charlotte said with great interest as she stretched out her hand. Please wait a moment. Tai stood up, pressed his headset, and whispered into the microphone on his collar for a while. After a few minutes, the information was sent to the tablet in his hand. Princess Charlotte took it, and the first thing she saw was a photo. If Poplar Fruit or Matisse were here, they would be surprised to find that this was the photo they took of Poplar Fruit. Regardless of how it got in her hands, Princess Charlotte looked at Poplar Fruit's slightly curly bangs and deep starry eyes and muttered, So it's you. You look pretty good. Chinese? There's no prince in China, right? Princess Charlotte was surprised when she saw the following. In fact, it was very difficult for foreigners to get information about China. However, because Poplar Fruit was still a little famous, they could easily get information about Poplar Fruit from some reports and social media platforms. For example, the exclusive interview that QQ News did with Poplar Fruit last year had a lot of background information about him. He's a commoner? Princess Charlotte looked at Poplar Fruit's information and thought with some regret. Sure enough, the newspapers are all lies. In her opinion, there was only the difference between nobles and commoners. Whether it was urban residents or rural residents, these were all commoners. There was no difference. Translator, this person is quite talented. No wonder he can speak French and Italian. Why didn't he say so earlier? Really, he made me so embarrassed. Princess Charlotte was still brooding about how she made a fool of herself. Princess Charlotte looked at the photos of Kiki and Poplar Fruit from his Weibo and felt a little envious. She's really his daughter. She's so cute. He's so good to his daughter. Princess Charlotte herself did not receive such good treatment. Her mother was the crown prince, and her father was also a big shot. They were not at home most of the time. How could they compare to Poplar Fruit's strong fatherly love and affection towards Kiki? This guy's a little stupid. He didn't train well and wanted to be a model for Givenchy. Why didn't he work hard as his translator? Princess Charlotte pursed her lips and thought with some dissatisfaction. He already has a daughter, but he's still so unreliable. No, I have to look for him. In the information in Princess Charlotte's hands, there was Poplar Fruit's room number in the Shangri-La Hotel. Wasn't it just right below her? Her personality was more carefree, and she would do what she wanted to do. Throwing down the newspaper, Princess Charlotte ran to Poplar Fruit's room with 2 bodyguards and knocked on the door. However, she was destined to be disappointed once again. Poplar Fruit had just left with his luggage 15 minutes before she came down. One could only imagine how mad Princess Charlotte would be at this moment. Chapter 722. I have to go to Bali first. Pai-Din-1 waved goodbye to Duan Xueqing at the airport. As a specially invited photographer of the Duan family, he needed to go to Bali first. Of course, the Duan family's own buyers would go with him. They wanted to get first-hand information about the new collections of the fashion giants this year before Bali Fashion Week. Like other shops, Fashion Week would become a carnival for them and the world's fashion industry. Duan Xueqing came to see him off, completely ignoring the strange looks of others. Of course, Duan Xueqing didn't know whether she was deliberately angry with her family or sincerely wanted to see Pai-Din-1 off. Their relationship was currently in a very mysterious stage. Pai Din 1 added a little initiative to pursue Duan Xueqing on the basis of stable development. Usually, when he came to see Duan Xueqing, he would either bring some snacks that Duan Xueqing liked to eat or a fresh flower that was said to be picked by the roadside. It was romantic, but not abrupt. Duan Xueqing didn't agree, nor did she make a clear statement. However, a few days ago, Duan Xueqing seemed to open her heart to Pai Din 1's pursuit after she learned from a senior that she met at Poplar Fruit's class reunion that Poplar Fruit had a junior in school. However, the good times didn't last long. Before they had time to develop further, Pai Din 1 had to take a plane to Bali. Duan Xueqing had to stay in China for another week because of the progress of her passport. After seeing Pai Din 1 off, Duan Xueqing stood outside the airport and watched the plane fly away silently. Whether the girl was standing in the drizzling alley of Jiangnan or in the bustling airport of Shanghai, her silent expression, her slim figure, and her cold breath always made her feel like a pure white lotus. In September, there was already the bleakness and desolation of the autumn wind. The girl was neither happy nor sad, or she didn't know whether to be happy or sad. Leaving the domestic grudges aside, Poplar Fruit and his daughter moved into the secluded villa in Ardal. After moving into the villa, the happiest person was not Poplar Fruit, but Kiki, who could finally get together with her good friend Luo Danny. There was no need to mention how excited they were when the two little girls met. They ran up and down in the villa, letting their happy laughter fill the whole villa. A few nannies were panting as they followed behind them, afraid that the two little devils would fall or bump into something if they ran too fast. They didn't know how the two of them had such stamina that they couldn't stop playing for an hour. It wasn't until the housekeeper caught them all and took them to the piano room for piano lessons that they finally quieted down. Poplar Fruit didn't know that Ardal had expelled the model who had exposed Poplar Fruit from Givenchy's team. He also didn't know that Ardal had privately informed the other tycoons to jointly ban the model. He also didn't know that Ardal had severely punished Jacques, the assistant director who had caused him to be in a passive position. Ardal didn't want him to know about any of this, just like the reporters who were looking for the man in the photo like they had been injected with adrenaline. Ardal isolated all the storms from the outside world outside the villa, creating a space for Poplar Fruit to practice without distractions. Poplar Fruit knew that the current peace was only temporary. The more Ardal suppressed him, the greater the backlash would be. Perhaps a storm was brewing. Yangwen needed to make use of the little time he had to quickly grow up. In the afternoon, Poplar Fruit trained very hard. In the evening, Poplar Fruit still didn't rest. After Babla went back and Kiki went to bed, he went to the temporary tea stage in the villa and practiced the catwalk over and over again. He had already practiced the whole set of basic cat steps to a decent level, but he still wanted to practice more. He wanted to practice how to use his body's movements and the changes in his eyes to show his inner scholarly and aristocratic temperament. Yangwa still remembered that Givenchy had taken a liking to these two qualities of hers. Models with good figures and solid basic skills were not easy to find, but there were still a lot of them in Bali. Her body was shaped by her innate talent, and her basic skills benefited from her hard work. These were not as rare as Yangwa's two temperaments. Otherwise, how could there be so many aristocrats and celebrities in the fashion industry? It was because their unique temperaments had conquered designers and audiences all over the world. Temperaments were not born, nor could they be obtained easily. They were traces left by personal experience and years of practice. Poplar Fruit wanted to stand out from the other models. He not only needed to build himself from a blank piece of paper to a supermodel with solid basic skills in half a month, but also to show his unique and charming temperament. This was a big problem that even Babla, who had a wealth of theories, couldn't solve. Poplar Fruit needed to explore it himself and find his own modeling path. He set up a DV camera in front of the stage and connected it to the LCD TV next to him. Poplar Fruit would walk on the stage for 10 to 20 minutes, constantly adjusting himself. During this time, he was blind. He didn't know whether he had succeeded or not, but he would use different ways to show each movement. Then, he would rely on his strong memory to record each movement as he walked. Then he would watch the DV camera and evaluate his own performance through the video taken by the DV camera. Speaking of which, he had watched a lot of videos of fashion shows recently, so he had some ability to judge himself. Getting rid of the dross and selecting the essence, Yang Guo did not pursue too much. As long as he could find 1 or 2 suitable movements, he would have a great harvest. Poplar Fruit didn't know. He was watching himself in the DV camera. Someone in the monitoring room was also watching him. He practiced here for the whole night. Artel pressed the rewind button, and the video returned to Poplar Fruit's last show before he stopped. "Yes, it's been 3 hours since 8:30, the housekeeper said respectfully. "What a hard-working and excellent child." Artel looked at Poplar Fruit's show with admiration in his eyes. He compared the video that Matisse had brought back for him. The Poplar Fruit now was totally different from the one he had seen a few days ago. On the screen, Poplar Fruit inadvertently wiped the sweat on his forehead. His eyes were still full of concentration, which made people feel a strong sense of shock. "Phew, I'm getting old. I'm going to sleep first. You keep an eye on him for me. Give him another half an hour. If he doesn't stop, tell him to go to sleep," Artel said. His slightly upturned mustache couldn't hide his gratified mood. Chapter 723. Come to think of it, if he could go back to the past, would he have made another choice? Artel didn't know what other people's answers were. He had experienced a struggle before. He couldn't remember why he had chosen Poplar Fruit. The relationship between him and Poplar Fruit was a bit strange. To put in a poetic Eastern word, it was fate. At first, he had met Poplar Fruit because he couldn't help chatting with him when he was in a foreign land. After chatting with him for a while, he was impressed by Poplar Fruit's French, which was even better than his. Maybe it was a kind of national pride that made him have a good impression on Poplar Fruit. Then, because of his conversation with Poplar Fruit, Artel was surprised by Poplar Fruit's profound knowledge for the second time. After looking at him carefully, he found that this young man had a maturity that didn't match his age, and he was full of confidence. Maybe he was really attracted by Poplar Fruit's temperament. Artel wanted to ask Poplar Fruit to find inspiration. Poplar Fruit didn't give him any inspiration, but his daughter, the lovely little angel, inadvertently reminded him. Poplar Fruit's role for Artel was to help him perfect the initial design. During the street shooting, Poplar Fruit shocked him again. Poplar Fruit's figure and temperament were completely tailor-made for his clothes. Artel might have forgotten that the relationship should be reversed. His clothes were tailor-made for Poplar Fruit. Once again, Artel invited Poplar Fruit, who had no modeling experience, to participate in the Bali Fashion Week show. Engrossed in the excitement of his work, Artel completely forgot that he had invited a guy who knew nothing about runway shows. It wasn't until more than a month ago that he suddenly remembered and hurriedly called Poplar Fruit over for model training. If she could go back in time, Artel didn't know if she would have given up on inviting Poplar Fruit, because Poplar Fruit was the most suitable man in the world to wear the China-style clothes he designed. For Artel, who pursued perfection, this was a dilemma. But now, after watching the video of Poplar Fruit practicing at night yesterday, Artel finally made up his mind. He would not regret it anymore. It was him. If such a hard-working and talented young man didn't succeed, then there would be no justice in this world. Give him a little more time, Artel thought. I believe that he and I will give you bastards a miracle. You bastards. He was referring to the group of reporters and paparazzi who had gathered outside Artel's design studio. As soon as Artel got out of his car, he was immediately surrounded. Microphones and recording pens were almost stuck into his mouth. "Mr. Artel, is the news on the internet and in the newspaper true?" The reporter asked in a gentle tone. "Sir, why do you want to ride on the coattails of Asians? Is it because Givenchy wants to open the Asian market by hook or by crook? May I ask if that yellow-skinned man is your illegitimate son? We know that you have worked in Asia for as long as 30 years. Hearing this question, the veins on Artel's forehead bulged. Artel could barely maintain the smile on his face anymore. Fortunately, his bodyguard and driver both squeezed in and used their thick arms to give Artel a space to move forward. Sir, sir, a group of reporters followed Artel relentlessly. They were like a group of wrapped dumplings slowly moving forward. Artel kept a calm smile on his face and didn't say anything, which made the reporters, who had been waiting for a long time, a little flustered. Finally, they reached the stairs of the design studio. Everyone thought that Artel was going to walk straight in, surrounded by his bodyguard and driver. Artel slowly turned around and faced the reporters condescendingly. Suddenly, the camera flashes lit up Artel's face, making his face pale. Fortunately, the driver was more experienced. He quickly took out a pair of sunglasses and asked Artel to put them on. Artel tapped his crutch lightly. His movement was not big, but everyone knew that he was going to say something, so they all quieted down. Apart from the sound of the shutters, everyone shut their mouths. The so-called report, you all know how much fiction there is in it, Artel said with a gentle smile. The group of reporters' faces were burning. Some of the newcomers even turned their heads away, not daring to look at Artel. I'll only say what I'm about to say once, Artel said slowly, chewing his gum. First of all, the child in the photo is a model I invited. It has nothing to do with expanding the Easter market. It is because he is the most suitable person to wear the new clothes I will introduce this fashion week, Artel said, raising his index finger. Wow! The audience burst into an uproar again. They thought that Artel would avoid admitting it, and then they would have to go back and make up a story again. They didn't expect that Artel would suddenly throw out such a big bomb. Now, they could imagine how shocking tomorrow's headlines would be. Sir, who is he? How do you know him? Sir, is the most suitable reason because he is your illegitimate son? When they realized what was going on, a lot of questions were thrown at them. Artel completely ignored them. He raised a second finger and said to himself. It was so noisy that his voice was covered by the reporters' questions. Fortunately, in order not to miss Artel's words, they quickly calmed down. As for this model, I will hold him responsible for slander. Artel had finished the first part of his speech. The audience looked at each other, not knowing what he had just said. However, Artel wouldn't repeat it for them. The child I chose is an excellent and talented child. If you think he is not good enough, I hope you can come to the main venue of the Fashion Week during the Givenchy show. I invite you to witness his excellence. Everyone thought that Artel was lying through his teeth. The model didn't send many photos, but as long as they were knowledgeable people, they could see that Poplar Fruit was not good enough. However, in order not to miss Artel's statement again, they all resisted the urge to ask questions. Third, I met this child by chance. There is no relationship at all. The reporters who just said that he is my illegitimate son. Are you questioning my relationship with Lisa? Artel hit the ground with his crutch, showing his anger. While everyone was still in a daze waiting for his fourth statement, Artel suddenly turned around, opened the door, and disappeared from the design room. Chapter 724. Artel left domineeringly, leaving behind a group of reporters who had gotten some information but were still far from the truth. They looked at each other in dismay. In fact, they were a little satisfied. After all, Artel had personally confirmed this fact, so they didn't need to guess blindly. This way, there would be a breaking point in tomorrow's news. Next, as reporters, they also knew that the truth needed to be dug out bit by bit. This kind of exploration with a little suspense was more desirable to the readers of the newspaper. If the truth was revealed all at once, they would feel bored. Well, they had already thought of the headlines for tomorrow's newspaper. Artel admits to using Asian models. Artel stubbornly refuses to admit his mistakes. So excellent? Why don't dare to let him show up? Givenchy Fashion Week is a huge scandal. They could also take things out of context and add fuel to the fire, making things more complicated and confusing. Anyway, they only cared about sales. Givenchy's public relations problems had nothing to do with them at all. At this time, some of the newspaper and online media couldn't hold back. Before everyone left, they had already asked the copywriters in the station to write a tweet exposing the truth. The whole of Bali was once again caught in the storm of public opinion. Bali was in a mess, but it didn't affect Poplar Fruit's practice. His performance today made everyone, including Barbara, praise him. Even Victor shouted that Poplar Fruit had entered the ranks of the top models. Of course, this was a bit exaggerated. Poplar Fruit was still a long way from being a top model. His sense of rhythm, stage presence, and even his sense of the camera were not enough. Perhaps he could be regarded as an A-lister in China, but in the world, he still needed to continue to improve himself. At this time, Barbara actually felt that her ability to teach Poplar Fruit fell short of her desire. Poplar Fruit was like a big sponge, constantly absorbing knowledge from her mind. Barbara kept digging into the various theoretical knowledge she had learned in school. Whether it was useful or not, she threw it all to Poplar Fruit. However, even so, she found that her teaching speed was not as fast as Poplar Fruit's learning speed. From this, it could be seen how awesome Yangwoo was. Perhaps, years later, she would write a book to recollect this experience. She felt that she would definitely describe the process of teaching Poplar Fruit with pain and joy. He was very happy to teach Poplar Fruit because Poplar Fruit could learn it quickly. However, she still couldn't fall asleep at night. It wasn't because she was under too much pressure, but because she had to rummage through her school notes to recover her memories of some unpopular knowledge. Sometimes she even had insomnia because she was thinking about how to teach Poplar Fruit. Immersed in the last week of training, Poplar Fruit did not know that far away in Yangcheng, China, there was an undercurrent surging at the moment. In a dark alley. Alright, actually, it wasn't dark at all. Not every bad thing needed to be hidden in a desolate corner. It was a busy street, and in front of a famous restaurant in Yangcheng, there was a taxi slowly driving over. A man with slick back hair got out of the car, looked at the signboard, and walked inside. Perhaps in real life, not many people knew him, but on the internet, he was a big V blogger with more than 5 million fans. Qin Shui. Some second-rate celebrities didn't even have as many fans as he did. Of course, there was no need to mention Poplar Fruit. This guy opened Weibo completely to record Kiki's growth. He had never interacted with his fans. Just by relying on warm and happy photos, he only had about 700,000 fans. Although it could be considered a small fire, it still couldn't compare to this kind of big V. Of course, Poplar Fruit also received a letter from the official website saying that they wanted to give him a V, but it was ignored by Poplar Fruit. Later, it was left unsettled. These big Vs either played some chicken soup for the soul by replacing the old wine with new bottles or collected some jokes to entertain the public. Over time, they also attracted many fans, and their income came from cooperating with some businesses or individuals, doing some copywriting, promotion, and even scandals. These made them earn a lot of money. Qin Shui came over today to discuss a business deal. It was said that she needed him to start a wave of rumors. He had done this kind of behind-the-scenes work many times. In the past few years, he had taken on no less than 10 orders. Now, the price was getting higher and higher, but there were still many people who came forward to give him money. When he pushed open the door of the agreed private room, there was already a person sitting there. If Zheng Yujia saw it, she would definitely realize that that person was Li Zichao's cousin, Li Qingxiao. Director Li, why do you have time to summon your little brother over today? Although Qin Shui was older than Li Qingxiao, Li Qingxiao's background was something he could not afford to offend. He could only respectfully call himself a little brother. I have something to talk to you about. Why would I look for you for no reason? You're not a great beauty. The words of a hedonistic son were always so blunt. With just a greeting, he could block you until you couldn't speak. Qin Shui was used to the way these people acted, so she wasn't angry. He chuckled and poured a cup of tea for Li Qingxiao. He said, "All right, since Director Li is so straightforward, then let's not make it so complicated. Director Li, just say it directly. What do you need me, old Qin, to do? You're a big V, so of course I want you to post on Weibo. What else?" Li Qingxiao threw a document bag over to him and picked up the delicacies on the table and tasted them with relish. Qin Shui didn't plan to eat her fill. He took a sip of tea and opened the document bag to read. There were a few pieces of printing paper and a USB flash drive inside. There wasn't much content. It was just an ordinary Weibo photo and a printout of the original Weibo text. Li Qingqiao even pretended to print it out in color. It was really a waste of Earth's resources. Qin Shui was a little puzzled. He saw that there didn't seem to be anything explosive in the photo, except that the girl was a little prettier. Then, the timing of the photo was very good. The girl turned her head and looked cute. "This is what I want you to hype up." Li Qingqiao waved his chopsticks and pointed as he said, "Their information is at the back. In a few days, they will be going abroad to participate in the competition. I want you to let everyone know about this photo on the 27th. You have to make everyone think that this kid is a couple with this woman." "Everyone knows?" Qin Shui asked. Li Qingqiao's words were really too unpleasant, and it was a little difficult to judge the extent of what he said. "The kind that causes a sensation in the country. Everyone is going to spread it like crazy," Li Qingqiao said impatiently. "Remember, the 27th. Qin Shui nodded and then looked at Li Qingqiao. Li Qingqiao rolled his eyes and threw another craft paper document bag over. This time it was thick. When he opened it, it was filled with banknotes. Li Qingqiao said coldly, "I know your rules, but I've paid in full. If you don't do it well, you know my rules." "Don't worry, Director Li. No problem." Qin Shui smiled slightly. He already had a plan to hype up in his heart. Such a small matter was not considered a challenge to him. Chapter 725. Yesterday, Song Jiwen got off work a little late. We knocked on the door opposite. Chun Amlin was wearing a mask and holding a box of tissues. She was watching a Korean drama with tears and snot. She had moved Song Jiwen's TV over. However, when she heard that Song Jiwen had helped her find a suitable place for the Tai Chi dojo, Chun Amlin immediately wiped away her tears. Her eyes were shining, and she looked very energetic. In the middle of the night, she actually wanted to drag Song Jiwen over to look at the venue immediately. Let me tell you, good places don't come often. Otherwise, you wouldn't have asked people to look for it for more than a month. Chun Amlin muttered to Song Jiwen, "If we don't make the first move, someone else will beat us to it." "I know." Song Jiwen was wearing sunglasses and driving the Land Rover that Poplar Fruit had left for him. Today, he was wearing a slim-fit, light-colored casual shirt with his sleeves rolled up, revealing his forearms. He looked very capable. Unfortunately, his belly looked a little bit like it ruined his fresh look at the moment. "Otherwise, I wouldn't have asked for leave to accompany you today," Song Jiwen said calmly. "You're not in a good state of mind right now. You'll suffer a big loss in business." Today, Song Jiwen had actually informed his leader that he would not go to work in the name of going out to investigate. Besides, he was also a deputy section chief, so he didn't have much to do. Otherwise, when he went out for a vacation, he had used up all his holidays. How could he have asked for leave? How could that be? Chun Amlin was like a newborn calf that was not afraid of a tiger. She asked with an unconvinced face, "I practiced negotiation in school." In terms of doing business, Chun Amlin had always been blindly confident in herself. Especially compared to Song Jiwen, she always felt that she, who studied economics, was better than Song Jiwen, who was a small bureaucrat who studied languages. Song Jiwen smiled and said, "You don't believe me?" At that time, if you were nervous and acted as if you had to get that venue, would the other party not increase your price? When negotiating, you have to be calm. You have to hide your desires. Only then can you bargain with the other party. It seemed to make sense. Chun Amlin furrowed his brows and said hesitantly, "But what if we bargain too hard and the negotiation fails? The originally good venue couldn't be rented again. Actually, if it's not bad, I'm willing to rent it for a little more money." "That's not how you do business." Song Jiwen rolled his eyes. Although the other party couldn't see through his sunglasses, he said, "Starting a business is different from using your family's money to buy clothes and go shopping. You don't know how to cut costs. You add money here and there. In the end, when you do the math, you'll find that you're doing a losing business." Chun Amlin was really good at being an armchair strategist. After hearing Song Jiwen's words and thinking about her own business plan, she felt a little dizzy. Of course, she still listened to Song Jiwin's words and felt that it made sense. Isn't your family an official? Chen Anlin was still a little unconvinced. She muttered, "Why do you seem to know more than me?" Although her family ran a martial arts club, it was now a business. Haven't you heard of a saying? Song Jiwin glanced at her and found that the side of this little girl's face was quite beautiful when she wasn't angry. Society is a university. Your experience in society is far more than what you can learn from reading books. This topic was a little heavy. Song Jiwin thought for a while and pondered over it. He told Chen Anlin a story about him leading a team to attract investment. Although he only attracted tens of millions of investment, the psychological game with the investors was very exciting. Chen Anlin only heard about the macro business war in school. She had never heard of such a detailed process. In less than 10 minutes, Chen Anlin was convinced by Song Jiwin. Okay. Chen Anlin shook her head and said wholeheartedly, "I'll watch from the side later. I won't say anything. You help me bargain." Song Jiwin laughed involuntarily and said, "That's not necessary. I just want you to calm down and face some business problems. You also need to learn how to negotiate with others. Don't mix in English when you speak. I hate this kind of people the most." Chen Anlin frowned and said, Song Jiwin usually spoke like this when he was at work. Most of the young people who spoke Cantonese liked to mix in a few sentences of English. Yanghua was one of them who was better at switching. When she spoke Chinese, she would speak Chinese. When she spoke English, she would speak English. Okay. Song Jiwin also knew that people in other places didn't like this habit of his, so he restrained himself. That's what I mean. You can't always rely on me to negotiate for you. You started your own business, and I have my own life. I can't accompany you every day to help you, right? Also, you still have to go back to Jean City in the future. Chen Anlin frowned. She felt that Song Jiwin's words made her feel vexed. She waved her hand and entered a state of irritation. She raised her eyebrows and said, Okay, I know that you're reasonable. Drive your car and don't bother me." Song Jiwin looked at her inexplicably and really ignored her. Yangqing City's traffic was quite bad, and they drove for almost an hour before reaching their destination. There were 2 primary schools and 1 secondary school nearby, which they saw when they passed by. At least in terms of traffic, there was a guarantee. They made an appointment with the owner, who was waiting for them upstairs. When Song Jiwin saw that person, he felt that he was an unscrupulous businessman. Why did he say that? Bald, triangular eyes, thin lips, and a wretched expression. No matter how he looked at him, he looked like a villain. When they went in, Song Jiwin's mouth was wide open. Although he had seen the pictures sent to him by his friends, he really didn't know that this place was so big. It's 1,400 square meters. It's big enough, right? We used it to open a restaurant. Then we rented it to someone else as a kindergarten and moved away. The unscrupulous businessman. The bald owner rubbed his hands and said with a smile, 1,400 square meters was definitely an exaggeration. This place was at most the size of 2.5 basketball courts, just over 1,000 square meters. But, according to this location, the rent for such a big place would definitely not be low. When Song Jiwin was talking to the bald owner, Chen Anlin walked around the place and even looked out the window. She couldn't hide the joy in her eyes. While the bald owner turned around to take a call, she secretly pulled on Song Jiwin's clothes and muttered, "Hey, Song Jiwin, I think this place is not bad. It's the same as my 3rd branch. The location, the size, it's too good." This fellow, did she think that others wouldn't know what she was thinking just because she spoke softly? Song Jiwin bitterly smiled. He clearly saw the bald owner's gaze sweep across her face. It was so obvious that anyone could see it. Looks like it's going to be hard to negotiate the price for this place. Chapter 726. Half an hour later, Song Jiwin shook hands with the bald owner with a smile and said goodbye to him. However, Chen Anlin did not have a good expression on her face. She swaggered off in front. It was normal for the negotiation to fail. Song Jiwin had expected this. Song Jiwen walked to the front of the car and saw Chun Anlin kicking the tires of the Land Rover gloomily. He smiled and said, "Okay, let's go back. What are you angry about?" "How can I not be angry?" Chun Anlin muttered. "It wasn't easy to find a suitable place, but you ruined it." Song Jiwen opened the car door and calmly didn't say anything. This made Chun Anlin furious. She opened the car door, climbed in angrily, and turned her face away. Song Jiwen didn't say anything. He knew that he had to avoid the sharp edge at this time. He closed the door and drove away. After a while, Chun Anlin slowly recovered from her anger. After all, she practiced Taiji Fist. The calmness of the Taiji Fist calmed her temper. "I'm sorry, I shouldn't be angry with you." Chun Anlin apologized. This time, it really wasn't Song Jiwen's fault. Song Jiwen had tried his best to help her negotiate the price, but the other party just wouldn't let it go. Even after they left, the bald owner was still smiling as if he was sure that they would go back. "It's okay." Song Jiwen shook his head. "I know how you feel, but that place isn't suitable for you." Song Jiwen didn't want to tell Chun Anlin that her expression made it impossible to negotiate the price. He had said it once before. It would be too long-winded to say it again. Chun Anlin was an adult. Song Jiwen believed that she would understand when she came to the conclusion. "Why not? Because it's expensive?" Chun Anlin asked curiously. She felt that this place was too suitable. It was exactly the same as the third branch of her family. Expensive is one thing, but the main thing is that it's too big, Song Jiwen said as he looked ahead. "Too big?" Chun Anlin asked in confusion. "Didn't you come to Yangcheng to set up a dojo using modern management methods? The more innovative you are, the more you should shrink the scale and reduce the cost of failure," Song Jiwen said. "Didn't you see that when the country wants to carry out reform and opening up or implement new policies, they will always choose one or a few cities as pilot projects? You can't put all your eggs in one basket right from the start. If you do, you won't have the capital to start all over again." Chun Anlin was not convinced and said, "How do you know I won't succeed? There are so many schools nearby. I'm sure many of these children would like to exercise." Chun Zongdai nodded and said, "You're right. But when you think about it, with such a big place, how many students would be needed to fill it up? Can you teach so many students on your own?" Chun Anlin thought about it and realized that it was indeed the case. Her family had been in business for a long time and had many disciples and grand disciples. They even had a large number of coaches. Now that she was in Yangcheng, she was weak and could not compare to her family at all. However, she still said stubbornly, "Don't we still have poplar fruit?" She always called poplar fruit brother when she called him, but she always called Song Jiwen by his name. This was a problem left behind by history. "Poplar fruit, don't even think about it. He's a busy man and has more things to do than me. He can't help you," Song Jiwen said as he shook his head. "What should I do?" Chun Anlin sat down in the front passenger seat. She suddenly felt that her dreams were getting further and further away from reality. "You have to take one step at a time and eat one bite at a time," Song Jiwen said with a smile. "Changing to a smaller venue will be a good starting point for you." "A smaller venue? When can I find a suitable one?" Chun Anlin said unhappily. "You knew it wasn't suitable, so why did you pretend to be polite with that pervert? He dared to ask for 100,000 yuan in rent. You might as well let him rob it. The most basic principle of doing business is harmony," Song Jiwen said. "I didn't know if you would insist on this venue, so I couldn't make a promise. Besides, if you don't need it now, how do you know you will need it in the future?" Chun Anlin nodded. She looked out of the car and asked in confusion, "Huh? Aren't you going back? It seems like this road is different from the one we took." The road was still right before, but now she didn't know where it was. Song Jiwen smiled and said, "I didn't say that I would only look at one venue today, right? Coincidentally, there is another venue that we can look at. It's not big, so it might be suitable for you." "Really?" Chun Anlin sat up happily. She clenched her left hand into a small fist and punched Song Jiwen's arm. She said, "Don't lie to me." Song Jiwen was a little depressed as he rubbed the place where Chun Anlin had just hammered with his left hand. He pretended to be very unhappy and said, "Hey, I helped you, and I still have to be beaten up, right? Anyway, do you think I'm just playing with you? Chun Amlin brushed away Song Ji-win's left hand. She was in a good mood now, so she didn't care about Song Ji-win's arrogance. She rubbed Song Ji-win's arm to please him and said with a smile, "Okay, don't make a fuss. I didn't even use my strength. How can it not hurt?" Song Ji-win continued to say indignantly, "Loud was said that you practice martial arts. I'm just an ordinary person. You can knock me down with a finger. You're a big man. Is it glorious to pretend to be so weak?" Chun Amlin bickered with him. In the midst of their quarrel, they finally arrived at the second venue. It wasn't far from where they lived. It was only about 3 blocks away. If they walked a little further, they could get there in 10 minutes by bike. It's not near the school, but the neighborhood is quite high-end. There are a lot of rich people here. It's a good potential consumer group. Song Ji-win muttered to Chun Amlin when he got off the car. The venue was above a shop facing the street. Maybe it wasn't rented out before, so there were only basic decorations inside, but it was quite suitable for a martial arts center. As long as the floor or tatami was laid out, it could be used directly. It's not big, about 200 square meters. Song Ji-win and Chun Amlin walked to the side and said, "No one rented this place before, so we could get a good price." "It's good, but this is a residential area. How can I attract students to sign up?" Chun Amlin frowned and asked with uncertainty, "Originally, I thought that if there were more students in the school, we could set up some QR codes for them to scan. Then we could do some marketing on Weibo and so on. But now it's all old aunties and uncles. They don't understand these things." Song Ji-win laughed and said, "Don't worry, I have an idea. I'll tell you when we get back." Chun Amlin looked at Song Ji-win hesitantly. He curled his lips and said, "Okay, you have to lower the price a little. I'm afraid that we won't be able to earn enough rent after opening." Chapter 727. Haiden-1 had been in Bali for more than a day. When he got off the plane, he was separated from the team. To be exact, he never belonged to the Duan family's team. The hotel he stayed in was relatively shabby and was still in the chaotic 20th district. Although it was better than the 18th district where black people gathered, there were more gangs in Southeast Asia. From time to time, there would be groups of 3 people gathered together and stared at pedestrians with bad intentions. Coming to this romantic city, Haiden-1 didn't go out to walk. No matter how prosperous and magnificent it was, it seemed to have nothing to do with him. He had been staying in the dim hotel room, waiting for his task to be given. This damn place. Haiden-1 stood up and twisted his body. He hadn't seen the sun for a long time. The air was damp and smelly. Even if he slept, he couldn't sleep peacefully. He smiled bitterly and shook his head, thinking about his bizarre experience in the past few months. He muttered, "Damn, you have the money to frame others, but you don't have the money to treat me to a hotel. Poor." Knock, knock. Knock, knock. A dull knocking sound came from the rotten wooden door. Haiden-1 nervously grabbed the baseball bat next to him and stared at the door with a dignified look. There was no way. This place was too chaotic. He was not sure if there would be a few bandits who would rob travelers. Knock, knock, knock. The knocking sound was a little impatient. Haiden-1 slowly moved to the door and gently opened the door. The anti-theft chain was still locked. "Why did you open the door now?" The person who spoke in pure Chinese, which made Haiden-1 sigh in relief. He also found that the voice was exactly the same as the contact he had contacted on the phone. He closed the door, removed the anti-theft chain, and opened the door again. "Why did you come so late?" Haiden-1 asked. "There's some news here. So, the country plans to change its plan of action. Then, we spent some time preparing some things." The person who came was wearing a black cap and a hoodie, looking mysterious. "All right, what exactly do you want me to do?" Haiden-1 turned his head and said, "You know, I'm not a special agent. I'm afraid that I'll mess up some of your operations." The person didn't answer him at all. He took out a brown paper bag and handed it over. He lowered his voice and said, "This is your mission." The Haiden-1 shook it and made a kacha-kacha-kacha sound. There seemed to be many small objects inside, but they were probably not keys because they were very light. He opened it. It turned out that there was a USB flash drive, a mobile phone, and a piece of paper. However, this USB flash drive was a little too much. There were 10 or 20 of them. Was he asking him to sell the USB flash drive? What do you mean? Aren't we dealing with poplar fruit? Pai Din 1 asked with a frown. There's some information inside. The person said, you don't have to worry about it. Your task is to send out these USB drives according to the address and contact of the newspaper office. Will they pay attention to me? You know, I can't speak French. Pai Din 1 asked. Speak English. Say that it's a big tip-off about the yellow model of Da Vinci. I'm sure that many people will come to you for it. The person said. Pai Din 1 was confused. He didn't understand French. When he came to Bali, it was as if he was blind and deaf. He didn't know what was going on outside. However, the yellow model should be referring to poplar fruit. He really didn't know what kind of conflict this poplar fruit had with the people behind him. They actually spent so much effort to set up a trap for a few months to deal with him. Okay, Pai Din 1 was still very relaxed. Although this tip-off was not very moral, at least there was no concern for his personal safety. After you finish this, you could go back to the hotel. The person said in a low voice, hurry up. You only have tomorrow. Pai Din 1 was stunned. He nodded and said, okay, but you have to promise me that you won't do anything to Duan shoe etching. Let's talk about it later. The person waved his sleeves and turned to leave. Pai Din 1 was stunned for a while. He gently opened the door and looked outside. The spiral staircase was empty. There was no trace of anyone who had been there. The mysterious person came and went without a trace, just like when he came. After sitting in a room for a long time and eating a few mouthfuls of the croissant for dinner, Pai Din 1 turned his head and looked at the bulging craft paper bag. After hesitating for a while, Pai Din 1 took out a USB flash drive. He then took out the computer that he had brought to deal with the photos, turned it on, and plugged it in. In the USB flash drive, there was a Word document with a lot of photos. Pai Din 1 clicked on the photos and saw that they were all of poplar fruit. Some of them were taken from Weibo, and the watermarks on them had not been removed. Pai Din 1 curled his lips. He thought that these people were too amateur. Some of them were screenshots of a store surveillance video. He could tell that the man in the video was poplar fruit, but he didn't know the other foreign old man. There were also a lot of candid photos. It seemed that the person who took the photos was quite skilled. Pai Din 1 gave him a thumbs up in his heart. The angle and clarity of the photos were very good. Some of the candid photos were of poplar fruit himself, while others were of him and other beautiful women. He had to admit that the quality of the beautiful women that poplar fruit knew was really good. They were comparable to Duan shoe etching. Oh, Pai Din 1's pupils shrank slightly. On his computer screen, there was a photo of Duan shoe etching. Pai Din 1 took a deep breath and continued to look. Looking at some of the photos of poplar fruit and Duan shoe etching, Pai Din 1's face was a little pale. Although Duan shoe etching's expression was still cold, that pair of affectionate eyes made him feel as if a knife was piercing his heart. He only had Duan shoe etching in his eyes, and poplar fruit had long been out of his range of attention. If he looked carefully, with his experience, he would definitely be able to see that poplar fruit's eyes, when he looked at Duan shoe etching, were actually very pure. His bright smile was not pretentious at all. In fact, it was just a normal behavior between friends. With a slight sigh, Pai Din 1 swiped his hand and circled all the photos of Duan shoe etching, then used a software to completely delete them. He then opened the Word document. It was full of French. Fortunately, there were photos interspersed in it. Pai Din 1 could guess that this was poplar fruit's blackmail material. He also found the part about Duan shoe etching and mercilessly deleted it. Not only that, he also backed up all the files in the USB drive to his computer. Then, he patiently reformatted the rest of the USB drive and copied and pasted the backup files on his computer. There were more than 20 USB drives. Pai Din 1 busied himself for more than 2 hours before he finished. He did not mind that the bread next to him was already cold. He picked it up and wolfed it down. Xiao Duan, this is all I can do, Pai Din 1 murmured as he looked at the computer screen. On the computer screen, There was a single photo of Duan's shoe etching. She stood slim and graceful among the flowers with a smile on her face. This was the only photo of her smiling that Pai Din one could find. Chapter 728. Recently, everyone had become numb to Poplar Fruit's progress. Even Victor, who had gone out for a private job a few days ago, looked at Poplar Fruit calmly and said, "Oh, great progress? That's normal. It would be abnormal if there weren't any big changes." Barbara was still teaching Poplar Fruit theory, but she was no longer the only one teaching Poplar Fruit. Ardell knew Barbara's weakness when it came to stage experience, so he called another instructor from Givenchy. It was Giselle. That's right. She was the tall woman who had pointed at Poplar Fruit's nose and said that she would keep an eye on Poplar Fruit. Giselle was called because she was a model who had won the title of Miss World. She had even been a frequent guest of Vogue when she had been active. Giselle's experience on stage was more than that of all the Givenchy instructors combined. Giselle and Barbara were polar opposites. Giselle had a lot of practical experience, but she didn't have enough basic knowledge because of her low education. Giselle could be called a fashion encyclopedia. She had been sent from a traditional academy, but had never really been on stage. However, Barbara's theory was not as convincing as Giselle's experience. Therefore, in Givenchy's headquarters, Giselle was fanatically supported by models, while Barbara was at the bottom of the pack. Ardell called Giselle to make up for Poplar Fruit's lack of experience. Giselle and Barbara each taught Poplar Fruit for half a day, so they could complement each other to a certain extent. Of course, when Giselle came to the villa for the first time and saw Poplar Fruit, she was full of disdain and disdain. In her eyes, Poplar Fruit was a bully. Although the model driven away by Ardell had nothing to do with her, she was also a model, so she had a common enemy. Although Giselle didn't give Poplar Fruit any face, Poplar Fruit still humbly asked her for advice. At this time, he didn't have time to argue with Giselle. He needed to seize every minute, every second, and every opportunity to learn and enrich himself. Otherwise, when the time came for the Bali Fashion Week, how could he prove himself? However, Giselle's dislike of Poplar Fruit came from her misunderstanding of the Poplar Fruit, and not because she wanted to target Poplar Fruit. Just like when she pointed at Poplar Fruit and said, "I'll be watching you." In fact, she still wanted to use strength to decide who was the hero. If you're not good enough and you're still on this seemingly sacred tea stage, then I'm sorry, Giselle will scold you to no end. If your strength is recognized by her, then she will still treat you as a friend. Of course, Poplar Fruit was the latter. In less than an hour, Poplar Fruit had convinced Giselle with his progress and talent. It was every coach's fortune to be able to meet such a student. Giselle wouldn't let go of Poplar Fruit. She did her best. Although she was shouting until her voice was hoarse, she was still in high spirits and didn't feel tired at all. Learning from Giselle, Poplar Fruit seemed to have opened up a new world in front of him. Wasn't his sense of stage performance very weak? In fact, most models were the same. When they walked on the runway, they were generally required to be expressionless. Otherwise, if they showed too much of themselves, they would steal the audience's attention from the clothes. The only things that could affect the stage performance were the model's figure, temperament, and eyes. The first two changes didn't happen overnight. Giselle's change started from the look in his eyes. Originally, Barbara had taught Yanghua how to be calm and indifferent, but Giselle had made Yanghua break this convention. Coldness, laughter, sadness, confidence, and determination, all kinds of emotions were expressed through the eyes. She didn't care how bad Poplar Fruit's acting was. She just wanted Poplar Fruit to create a pair of eyes that could speak in all kinds of extreme emotions. A pair of eyes that could express the mood of the tea stage according to the needs of the clothes and then adapt to it. They could firmly control the atmosphere of the tea stage. If they wanted it sad, it would be sad. If they wanted it happy, it would be happy. If it were Poplar Fruit's friend, the new internet celebrity, actor Chae In-juan's performance would probably be much better than Poplar Fruit's. In the end, Poplar Fruit still lacked a little dramatic performance ability. However, Poplar Fruit had an advantage. When his talent couldn't make up for the gap, he still had extraordinary efforts to push him forward. At night, Poplar Fruit would find some performance books to read and then ponder in front of the mirror for a few hours. The next day, Giselle came again and saw that Poplar Fruit had improved by leaps and bounds. In addition to the stage performance, Poplar Fruit's sense of rhythm was very bad, which was related to his poor sense of music. Every time Poplar Fruit listened to the soundtrack from the stereo, his own rhythm was different. It was difficult to correct. Barbara tried for several days but couldn't do it. After Giselle came, she taught Poplar Fruit to read the notes in his mind and count the time. Although this method was very unconventional, it had a significant effect on Poplar Fruit's performance on the catwalk. Anyway, the music on the catwalk was actually a single beat, and there wouldn't be many changes. Giselle gave Poplar Fruit a summary of 17 beats, including slight changes. She let Poplar Fruit memorize each beat and how his own pace was. Then, when he went on stage, as long as he adjusted the first step, there wouldn't be any problems. This method was tailor-made for Poplar Fruit. If it were someone else, they wouldn't be able to learn it well. Poplar Fruit's memory couldn't be measured in an ordinary way. In just one afternoon, Poplar Fruit was able to convert these 17 beats into muscle memory. This was a good effect that Giselle didn't expect. Of course, Giselle was used to it. She got along well with Barbara, Matisse, and Victor. In private, she even bet how many miracles Poplar Fruit would perform today. Miracles, other people couldn't even hope for one, but Poplar Fruit's miracles could be counted on one hand. However, Poplar Fruit's progress did make all the people who supported and cared about Poplar Fruit, including Ardell, feel very gratified. Now, Poplar Fruit's ability could be ranked among the nearly 100 models in the base camp, and there were still more than 5 days left. Poplar Fruit still had a chance to continue to improve. Ardell was full of confidence. He was also looking forward to the moment when Poplar Fruit let his clothes shine. Chapter 729. Carrying a heavy backpack, Pai Din 1 appeared on the streets of Bali. After leaving the chaotic neighborhood, Pai Din 1 finally breathed a sigh of relief. His backpack contained his laptop and camera. These were his most valuable possessions since he came to Bali. It was fine to leave his clothes in the hotel, but Pai Din 1 felt that leaving his laptop in the hotel would put him in danger of being burglarized. Pai Din 1 was not in a hurry to go to the place he had agreed to meet. He went to the nearest Bali subway station and found a public service area where luggage and bags were stored. He rented a box for 20 euros and put his backpack in it. Carrying a backpack with his laptop and camera equipment was also a burden. If the other party changed their mind or wanted to rob him, he would not be able to run away. Pai Din 1 took out an inconspicuous black plastic bag from his backpack. Inside was his mission for today. Pai Din 1 found a public bathroom and went in. He took out 2 or 3 USB drives from the plastic bag and put them in the zipper pocket of his jacket. Then he squeezed the air out of the plastic bag and tied it with a knot. Then he pulled open his pants and stuffed it into his underwear. It was a little bulging and looked like a big bird hiding inside. It was a little unsightly. Pai Din 1 pulled up his pants with one hand and fiddled with it with the other hand. He fiddled with it and changed it to a comfortable and inconspicuous position. Pai Din 1 was still a little worried. He patted his pants and tiptoed. When he felt that there was not much effect, he pushed the door open and went out. When he arrived at the street park, Pai Din 1 took out his phone and found the earliest text message. He replied in English, "Southwest of the park, there is a bench under the red street lamp. Sit there and wait for me." It was a bit like a secret agent meeting. Bai Tingyuan did it mysteriously, but he had no choice. He was not familiar with Bali, so it was better to be careful. Seeing a gentle-looking middle-aged man in a suit sitting on the bench with a cup of coffee, Pai Din 1 cautiously looked around. After confirming that there was no problem, he walked over. He went around the back of the bench and sat down beside the middle-aged man. Only then did the middle-aged man, who was looking around, notice his presence. Mister, why? Pai Din 1 reached out to shake his hand. Oh, the middle-aged man laughed. He still wanted to joke with Pai Din 1. However, Pai Din 1 coldly said, "Enough with the nonsense. Did you bring the money?" "Of course." The middle-aged man took out an envelope from the inner pocket of his suit jacket. "Here's 1,000 euros, just as we discussed yesterday. This is the deposit. The other half will be given to you after we release the news." Pai Din 1 took it and opened the envelope. There were 2 purple 500 yuan notes inside. Pai Din 1 took out one and rubbed it with his fingers. The texture was good, and there were bumps on it. It was the same as the verification method he learned on the internet. "Why, I also need to check the goods." The middle-aged reporter was probably used to this kind of business. He smiled in a relaxed manner and spoke with his strange accent in English. Pai Din 1 did not say much. He took out a USB flash drive from his left pocket and handed it over. The middle-aged man shrugged. He also took out his phone and connected the USB flash drive with an OTG cable. He clicked on a few pictures to take a look. Is it him? Their bodies look very similar. The middle-aged man still had some doubts until he saw the picture of Ardal and poplar fruit standing together. "Oh my God!" He could not help but exclaim. "If it's just these few pictures, I wouldn't ask for such a high price." Pai Din 1 shrugged and said, "Look at that document." The middle-aged man opened it and was shocked again. "It's so detailed. Why, how did you do it?" Pai Din 1 smiled and did not answer the question. "I said before that the USB flash drive's information is worth more than the price." The middle-aged man shrugged. This seemed to be his signature move. He only skimmed through it briefly and already felt the value of the USB flash drive. It was more than 2,000 euros. Even if it was multiplied by 2 or 3, he would still be willing to pay. One had to know that the information inside, if used properly, could make the headlines of his newspaper company for a week. Of course, the middle-aged man would not tell Pai Din 1 the truth. He secretly rejoiced in his heart. The Chinese are really stupid. Such valuable information was sold at such a low price. "I made a fortune this time." Since he had made a fortune, he was in a good mood. He happily took out a second envelope and handed it to Pai Din 1. He smiled and said, "My friend, I've already verified this information. Overall, it's not bad, so I don't have to wait for it to be published. This is the last half of the money. Take it." Pai Din 1 took it expressionlessly. He held in his hand and gently flicked it. Then he took out 2 large bills and put them in the previous envelope. "Okay, my friend, I can't wait to take it back and study it for tomorrow's headlines." The middle-aged man smiled and stood up. He said, "It's been a pleasure working with you this time. If you have more information, don't forget to look for your friend." Pai Din 1 stood up, nodded slightly, and shook hands with him. However, he scolded in his heart. "Look for you? Only an idiot would look for you." The middle-aged man was about to turn and leave when he suddenly remembered something. He stopped and said to Pai Din 1 with a smile, "My friend, this information, please keep it a secret. It's exclusive to us. You promised." "I promise." Pai Din 1 spat out 2 words in English. "Promise my ass." Pai Din 1 was prepared to sell the goods to hundreds of companies. He would not stop until he was full of these 20 USB drives. Although the person behind the scenes did not say that he could sell the information in the form of a business transaction, he did not say that he could not, right? Pai Din 1 was not worried about what the newspaper companies would do to him. After all, he was a nobody, and they would not be able to find him. They could not come to China to look for him in the future, right? After saying goodbye to the middle-aged man, Pai Din 1 also quickly left the street park. He was not afraid that the man would come after him, but he had to hurry. He took out his phone and sent a text message to the next person. Pai Din 1 wanted to sell these 20 USB drives before the news spread. Behind Pai Din 1, on a pedestrian bridge, 2 men in black stood there with cameras. Is this guy reliable? It took him 2 months. He's okay, but he's a bit stubborn. I'm afraid that he will betray us. It seems like he's a romantic. What are you afraid of? Now that we have these photos, he will die even if he betrays us. Besides, he's a chess piece. He will be thrown away after 2 more uses. What are you worried about? That you're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.